Okay. Yeah, today it's an amazing and exciting day because for Beyond the Veil, we don't have, usually it's like one or two people, but we have four of us here. So it's gonna be more of like, I don't know, it feels home. And I'm so grateful because even people that we're together, these are the people that we work together in other areas. We're waiting for Jean-Michel from Rwanda as well. I messaged him. We hope he's gonna be able to join as soon as possible. But everyone here, every one of you, each one of you, our speakers, we're so grateful to have you today. And we hope that this conversation is going to benefit many Rwandans, and not only Rwandans, many people, everybody from different community who can be able to hear this. Because I think what's going on right now, the fight against the fight against Black racism, it's not just for one race, it's for everyone, and we're so grateful to do our part. Sometimes it might feel like we're not doing enough, but I think what we're doing right now, it's one of the ways that we can help our community. We can come together as a community to end racism. To begin the conversation, I would like to introduce, Beyond the Veil. We always say this, Beyond the Veil was born last year with the idea to help Rwandans to learn how to, with a mission to help Rwandans to learn how to take care of their mental well-being. We looking for every Rwandan descent, diaspora, Rwandan in diaspora, in Rwanda, everywhere. We trying to do that through education, training, counseling, therapy, seminars, training individuals or people who are responsible of or leaders of many people. So the idea is that realize that not everybody is going to have access to therapy or access to counseling, but we believe that if we can provide the basic knowledge to many people, we can all be able to help ourselves. Because taking care of our mental well-being, it has to be part of our conversation. It has to be part of our everyday life. And we're so excited. Soon we're gonna share with you guys with one of the projects we worked on called Rwanda 365. It's about reminding Rwandans that taking care of our mental well-being, it's not just once every month or when something is happening or whenever one person took their life, that's when we're gonna talk about it. This is a conversation we want it to happen every single day of the year. So, and the reason why you're here is because you're concerned, you want the well-being of your people. Many people can ask why we're doing this at Beyond the Veil, why the focus shouldn't be on mental health. But I just wanna tell you that when we seek justice, we actually contributing to our mental well-being. There's no way we can be mentally well without, when we live in a world where we don't feel safe, where many people feel discriminated, for things like the color of their skin. So this is why today we invited, different speakers, especially some of our speakers, all of them actually, they're doing amazing things in their community. And we believe that, they come from different areas, they can come from, they have, different knowledge, but well enough to support our conversation. So today it's about coming together, actually learn and see ways we can be engaged, see ways we can take action. So we're not gonna be able to cover the entire history of, Black people, racism, colorism, mental health in our community, or discrimination, police brutality. But the thing is, we want to encourage you. We want to open the conversation. Everything you're gonna hear on this panel, we want you to go back and dig in and understand. But the thing is, to make a change, we have to understand. We have to have the knowledge to know what needs to be done. We can be angry, we can be upset, but at the end of the day, we want to do something about it. And part of it is, to understand, and is to understand the system. So without taking a long time, let me see, one moment. Yeah, I see many people are here. Is Jean-Michel here?
Yes.
Oh, yeah. Oh, thank you so much. So, yeah, so I'm so glad everybody here. So we're gonna start with everyone. I'm gonna try to introduce each one of our speakers because they are all amazing. They have done a lot of work in the area, not only in the area, but they're doing a lot for our community, but they can also add they can add anything they want to introduce themselves. Because, while I know them, somehow I truly believe that they have a personal message, they have a personal way to introduce themselves. And today we're gonna start with Shell. Shell, I'm so excited. I told you guys today we have 4 people from Beyond the Veil. We're so excited to have a conversation with you all. So today we're going to start with Shell. I'm gonna introduce her a little bit. So Shell, I'm gonna say that right now she's currently pursuing a master's degree in theology studies at Tyndale University. She's also a teacher. She in the education sector for the past almost 9 years, and she primarily works with Toronto Urban Inner City children and youth. And also she was hired by Public School Board, in which she serves her community with passion and dedication. She's also anointed to speak the word of God and also to lead a life of his unprecedented power. And also, I want to say that Shell is also a community advocate for Black youth through different programs. She also started an organization called Black Esteem. She's the creative director. She's gonna say more about that. She's also the creative director of Beyond the Veil. And also she's the CEO or the founder of Purium Lipstick. If you can see the lipstick that I'm wearing right now is from Purium Cosmetic. And Shell is the one, the founder or the CEO of that lipstick line. So while we're supporting each other, I just wanted to throw that one there. So the thing is, we're going to start, the reason why I chose to start with Shell is because she's part of the, I would say, African-American community. I don't know if I can say she's Canadian, maybe she's gonna identify herself well. And at the same time, I thought that we Rwandans, yes, we're Black people, but I think there's a lot we need to learn of what's happening in North America, the fight against Black racism. I truly believe that, Black people originally from, who are African-American or Caribbeans, they can understand better from what's going on. So that's why we invited her on this panel so she can share with us, especially she's gonna touch base on the topic of Black ownership. How can we encourage, many Black people, to become founders, to invest in our own businesses? And also she's gonna help us to understand different concepts around the Black racism. So without taking long, I want to welcome Shell Graham. Thank you so much for being with us. So this is your time, welcome.
All right, thank you so much, Lydia, for that introduction. So as Lydia has mentioned, I like to think of myself as like a social philanthropist. So that's someone who is active in the community, looking at different issues that are happening in the community and trying to solve those problems. And, I'm just really appreciative for being invited on this platform to speak because the Rwandan community is very dear to my heart. So I sit on Beyond the Veil as a creative director and just helping, Lydia tell stories about, her experiences through the eyes of the people. So without talking too much about myself, I just want to really get into the reason why we're here. And I think that this is so amazing that we are coming together on this platform to talk about this topic such as anti-Black racism. Now, I know for many people that is a new word that is floating around, and people are becoming more exposed to that word. And for some people, they've been familiar with it for a while. For other people, they're just starting to get familiar with that word. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that now. I'm just going to adjust my camera so that we can see, that I can see everything. So just starting off with what is anti-Black racism? So by definition, anti-Black racism is defined as, the policies and the practices within institutions that are put in place to, reinforce beliefs and attitudes and prejudices, and really discriminatory attitudes about people that are Black or from Africa, or that are African descent, have African descent. So when we talk about these institutions, we're really talking about education. So there's barriers in education that exist to prevent Black people from being successful. In healthcare, there are barriers that are put in place, to make Black people feel that they are, less of valuable. Dehumanizing Black people. So we'll talk a little bit about dehumanization and what that means. And there are things put in place, barriers put in place in the justice system, as we are seeing with what's happening with George Floyd, and just all over the world with police brutality and just how Black people are being treated. And so this is just understanding that oppressing Black people, hating Black people, trying to keep Black people down is something that is not just a personal attitude, but something that is coming from an entire system, an entire institution. It's embedded in our daily lives and the constructs that govern our daily lives. And so this is really where the problem is coming in, because it is the entire system that is reinforcing this type of attitude and behavior, and it's just unacceptable. So after going into that, I really want to transition into this idea of anti-Black racism and just how this impacts Rwandans, especially Rwandans who live in North America, and how this impacts you, the community. So most Rwandans, because of the shade of their skin or heritage or ancestry, are considered Black by the definition of Blackness in North America. So, as Rwandans, whether they're identifying as Black or not, this is a definition that is being placed onto them, especially in this North American context. So it just becomes a situation where, because of a certain shade of your skin, or because of your ancestry, and who you are really, and who your family is, and the history of your families, and where they come from, you are under this umbrella of Blackness. And it's so unfortunate that, the ignorance of other communities and the system that is put in place to not even consider Black people as a diverse group of people, from different places, with different cultures, with different traditions, not even considering us as different people with differences, but just lumping us all into one category, and everyone's subjected under this type of treatment. So when we talk about that, Rwandans are definitely impacted, A, because of what they look like, and B, because of who they are and where they come from. Mm-hmm. So now that we, get a sense that, this is the situation and this is the impact, we're going to talk a little bit about ways in which, the Rwandan community would be impacted because of the identification of being Black. So one of those ways is underemployment. Black people are more likely than, white people or their white counterparts to be unemployed. So how devastating to know that we can be equally as qualified, we can be equally as educated, and, we are underemployed. We are not getting the same opportunities as, our other counterparts, or even, we're not getting the same opportunities as other races. So when we talk about anti-Black racism, we're really talking about that even, there's racism towards Black people, even from other races. So it's not just racism, that we're experiencing from white people, but we are experiencing racism from other races as well. And that's why it's not just anti-racism, but it's anti-Black racism. So the unemployment is an issue. We're talking about the dehumanization, as I was speaking about. The Charter of Rights and Freedoms is there to protect everyone, yet we have a different experience with that. when you look at our experiences, you know, with law enforcement, it's not, we are not getting the same treatment. As a matter of fact, we are being treated less than human. And there is, you know, a genocide happening, you know, around the world where Black people are being killed, especially our Black men. So touching a little bit on that topic. One of the factors is also poverty. You know, there is an unequal access to wealth that we are experiencing. So there are barriers that are put in place so that us as a people are not able to access certain avenues of wealth and to, you know, own property and own things as much as our white counterparts. And the reason for that is because, you know, as our ancestors were brought to North America, I'll even speak about a Canadian context, as our ancestors were brought here to Canada, the idea was never to make us equal. The idea was that we were always supposed to be lesser than. And so because of that, there is a notion out there, so how dare us try to have equal rights, and how dare us try to, you know, own property and attain wealth and own businesses, because we are supposed to be seen as less. So after understanding that piece, you know, talk about why is it important to join the movement for movements such as Black Lives Matter. Black Lives Matter, or just being pro-Black, or just, you know, advocating for the rights of Black people and the freedoms for Black people. So why is it important for you as, you know, the Rwandan community to join this fight? And really it comes down to the fact that we need a reformation. We need to fix the damage that is being done to our communities. And there's so much damage that is being done in so many different ways that I won't get into too many because I know we don't have time for that. But it's the idea from the beginning has been to break apart the Black family, you know, so basically zeroing in on our men, breaking them down, you know, breaking down family structures. And we're seeing the evidence of that, you know, working in the school system, I see the evidence of, you know, how these impacts, how they affect children. And, you know, children are our future generation. So it's like a wash, rinse, and repeat cycle. It just keeps going and going and going. So now that we know a bit of background on all of those things, we can now start to think to ourselves, you know, how can I make a difference? How can us as a community make a difference? How can, you know, the Rwandan community join with other communities, other Black communities, and so that we can, you know, really make a change. And so the first thing in making a change or making a difference is really the level of commitment. You know, as a people, we have to get together and really start to, you know, become very knowledgeable about protests. You know, engaging in peaceful protests when we can. So if there are marches happening, you know, joining those marches, because we are definitely more powerful in numbers. And so the more of us that get together and really make a statement, we can change laws, we can change conditions. Getting involved in the area of politics. So understanding who to vote for. You know, what do these candidates really stand for? How will the policies and practices that these candidates want to put in place, how will that impact and affect, you know, us as a Black community? And how will those policies and procedures and practices affect our children? Ultimately, that's something that we need to start to become versed in. So if, you know, you see town hall meetings, so that are available so that you can get informed, it would be a great idea, because the more knowledge we have is the more strength we have, the more powerful we are to make changes. Talking about, you know, making a difference with our children. You know, Black children are among, especially in Canada, are among the lowest achieving group in the school system. So there is a huge gap between the success of Black children and the success of children in other racialized groups or other marginalized groups of children. So when we think about, why our Black boys are reading at a lower level, why we are graduating at, lower rates, when we're talking about all those things, it's not because, Black children are not as smart as everybody else, but it's, again, we're talking about the barriers that are put in place so that our Black children are not succeeding as much as everybody else. So we want to close those achievement gaps. And the best way to do that, for those of you that are parents, is to become informed. Get involved, go to those parent-teacher interview meetings, question, some of the practices that are, or the practices that, are put in place. Talk to, the teachers, talk to the principals and superintendents, and really, get informed, because the best way to close those gaps and to help our children is to be knowledgeable. Another thing is to, buy books that our children can see, your children can see themselves in. Books that really make your children feel proud of who they are and what they look like, and, filling them up with positive messages saying that they are brilliant and beautiful, and that their Blackness is a gift, and it comes with a history of strength and resilience. So talking, to your children about those things. I would also say the other factor to making a difference is ownership. So, if you have a business idea, finding those resources to, develop that idea, building businesses. If you don't have a business, supporting another Black-owned business, whether the owner is from Rwanda or not, supporting, getting a list of Black businesses and start, putting your money there. Things like building financial credibility, seeking out a financial advisor on, how you can make a better financial situation for you and your family. And ultimately, doing these things, we want to acquire, the goal would be to acquire generational wealth. And by that, I mean, building money or building assets so that the children to come, the generations to come will have. And not only on a personal level, but on a collective level. So we're talking about community, building, working together to, I would love to see, some Black-owned communities with, Black-owned hospitals, Black-owned libraries, Black-owned grocery stores. I would love to see that happen. And the only way we are going to start to see that happen, so that we are not always at the bottom of the totem pole, meaning we are not always the people who are in, on the brink of poverty or experiencing poverty, or the people that are not as successful or less achieving, is to start to set up our future generations. Where we are today is because of, we are being successful off the backs of our civil rights leaders and other activists and business owners and philanthropists that saw the need to, invest in the Black community and to fight for the Black community. And so because of all their work, we are here. So we need to do our job to make sure that our generations are even further along than we are. So my call to action before I wrap up with you today is start small, begin the conversation with people around you, start building, a network of people that believe what you believe in, that, want to see the change as bad as you do, or even people that are just curious or want to inquire as to, why they should get involved, why this is should be important to them. And the changes can really start from there, just conversations such as this one. If you have a social media platform, start, inviting people to have those conversations on your platform, because the more that we have these conversations, the more that it will start to build momentum, and people will come together with creative ideas on how we can definitely make a change. So that's my call to action to you today. Thank you for having me on this platform, just to give you, a little taste of what needs to be done and why we need to do it. So Lydia, I'll turn it over back to you.
Thank you so much, Michel. It was a great conversation. Although I have my one question,
Yes.
I told everyone, I think I'm gonna say here, I just message everybody. If you have a question after each speaker, we're going to allow 1 or 2 questions. So that way, when we're done, we don't want to go back to everyone because it can take longer. So I'm gonna invite you, if you have a question to Michel, please, you can open your mic, or you can unmute yourself and ask her a question. In the meantime, while we're waiting for people to ask their questions, 1 or 2 questions we're going to allow before we welcome Brent. So I'm gonna ask you, when we talk about, voting, right?
Yes.
Many people, they're adapting, because sometimes, some of us are worried that, our leaders, once we elect them, they're not doing what they're supposed to do. They do nothing. There's this say that, Black people, are just for votes. There's something like Black votes, if I remember well. They use us just to be elected. Once they are elected, they do nothing for our community. So what can you say about it?
Well, my response to that really is about, why are we not starting to set up our own politicians to be in positions of power? How are we, I think more than an answer, I have a question. So what are we doing as a community to ensure that there are people put in place that are for the welfare and the benefit of the Black community? How are we going to start putting in, things in place, and how are we going to start supporting people who can be put in place to really change what is going on behalf of the Black community? So that would be the question that I would be throwing out there, because really, for as long as we don't start to help other Black people who are really about this work get into positions of power, there will not be the change that we want to see, will not happen. So we have to start putting our own people in place in order to be able to speak for us. Because the truth is, if we're not at the table, then we don't get spoken for. So that would be my response to that.
Okay, so I don't see any question right now. Maybe if we're not using this time for Michel question, if you have a question later on, we're going to, we're saving this time. You can send your question anytime. So a quick reminder, now we're gonna have Brent. After Brent, prepare a question. After he speaks, we're gonna welcome 1 or 2 questions. And also, if you have a question to share as well, you can put it together, send it, we can ask it as well. We can share it as well once Brent is done speaking. There's somebody, Rita, is saying that when Michel talks about how children are being affected, does she mind highlighting specifically what ways to which they are affected?
So when we talk about children being affected, like we are talking about especially in the education system, many of our Black children who are being labeled as terms such as behavioral. So just even misunderstanding, the way that Black children culturally, culturally are socialized, those behaviors are being deemed as, behavioral, meaning that there is something wrong with this behavior, there's something negative about this behavior. And so because of that, that really is impacting, how there's the success rate of those children. Because the minute that, discriminatory mindsets start to lead about our children being behavioral or being violent, that really impacts, how their school day goes. That impacts how their peers view them in the classroom. That impacts how, the teachers interact with them. So that's just one example of, how this is really impacting our children and why there needs to be a change.
Thank you so much. I think I can show you guys my t-shirt. Black kids are not mentally retarded. That was my message yesterday at the protest. You know, one thing I can add to what Shelley's saying is that, you know, it's important that you try to find a friend or anybody in every area that you feel like you don't understand. Like personally, having Shell in my life, there are things that she's been helping me to understand with my kids' education, because she's a teacher. When I have a doubt, I go to her and I'm like, you know, I have a doubt on ways they're treating my child. Do you think it's fair or not? And sometimes she even tells me, you know, ask this question to a teacher. Do the same thing if you have a friend who's a nurse, doctor, professor at the university. That's why, you know, what Shelly is saying. We're going to partner, work together, come together so we can help each other, you know, to handle everything going on in our lives. So I think the other thing, last question before we move on to Brent. Somebody said Africa, for example, Shell, I know soon you're gonna be adopted from the Rwandan community.
I'm
We have
excited.
a question for you today. She's asking, you know, what do you say? No, it's not that. He's saying, what do you ask of African more specific, especially the youth, to do in this situation? For example, you know, we understand most of those things are easier to understand from the Western, you know, context. But what can you tell, you know, an African youth to do in this situation?
Okay, so would that be, so just to clarify, would that be an African youth that's living in Africa or living here?
I think I would say both in general, because what's affecting a Black person, youth in North America, actually it's affecting everyone around the world, every Black African youth around the world. I think if a Black youth can know what to do in North America, we can also use those, you know, that knowledge to change our lives back home in Africa.
Right. So, you know what? I think that understanding how the system works and what positions can be put, what positions can, you know, as an African youth, as you're growing and you're maturing, and, you know, you're choosing different career paths, or you're choosing, you know, you're setting a plan for your life. Understanding how those systems work and how you would be able to change those systems, I think is extremely important. I think this idea of self-concept, you know, who am I and what makes me valuable to the world? And finding and doing that self-exploration is so important, because the minute that you as a youth find out how you're valuable and what makes you significant and what makes you unique, you begin to understand the uniqueness and the beauty of the people that you're a part of and your ancestry. And once you start to understand that, you know, you become very inspired about changing those systems that are put in place to try to devalue you and make you feel less than. So one little thing that you can start with is finding, networking, finding people that are on the same journey and mission as you are. It is going to be so important to the change for you to find people that you can connect with. If you find people that, you know, are saying the opposite of what we're talking about today, then you know that those are not the people that you should be friends with. Those are not the people you should have company with. Because if those people don't understand why this is important, or then they don't understand your value as a Black youth either, right?
Thank
or
you.
their value.
Thank you so much. And I think Kizito is gonna touch base on that part. So stay tuned, you know, the part about Africa, who we are, our identity. So Kizito is going to touch base on that part. So right now we're going to welcome Brent Years. So he's a really good friend of Rwandan. There's so many ways we can introduce him. But today he's going to specifically, you know, discuss, you know, on the impact of racism, the viewpoint from other races, understanding that this is everyone's issue. So in ways to, before I introduce Brent, I want to remind you that this conversation is about being informed and take action. So if you feel, you know, the burden in your heart, you feel like you want to do something, all of us are here. We don't know 100% what we're doing, but we know that adding a 1%, coming back together, we're gonna hit 100. So you're here, I'm here, let's get there, let's be informed and do something about it. So beyond that, sorry, Brent Diaz to introduce himself. He is a trauma therapist. He teaches part-time in the schools of social work at York University, and also Lakehead University. He also teaches about trauma at Tyndale University, my school, and he also works with various population who have experienced trauma, violence, and war around the world, including in Rwanda, where he has consulted with trauma services in Kigali. And he has also worked with the Rwandan community in Toronto, providing a training for a local Rwandan church to deal with the impact of the genocide. Brent is also a board member of Beyond the Veil, and he helps the organization with their messaging to the Rwandan people in terms of communicating about the impact of trauma. He also said that it's a huge privilege. I never forget that. And we tell you as well, it's a privilege to have you. So yeah, he helps with Beyond the Veil, on trauma education and training. So today we welcome him. We can't forget that he's a husband to Christy Diaz and also a father to four amazing children. If you have him on social media, we always enjoy seeing his family pictures. So today we're gonna hear from him the impact of racism, the viewpoint from other races, and also how this issue, how we have to understand that this is for everyone. So we welcome you, Brent. This is your time. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you so much for having me, Lydia, and everybody else. Thank you so much for tuning in and listening. It's, as Lydia said, this is a huge privilege for me to be here. And of course, I'm going to address, I don't know if it's an elephant in the room. I found the Rwandan population to be very, very, very gracious and extending all kinds of warmth and acceptance to me as I've tried to work with them. But the elephant in the room is that I don't identify as a Black person. And yet you've invited me into this space to talk about anti-Black racism and to address some of the specific things that are happening within the Black community, to the Black community, by other folks. And this is again, it's a huge privilege for me to be a part of this. So I'm really aware that pieces that I hold, there's probably privileges that I hold truthfully, that many of the people listening in are not going to have, because of this color of our skin and the ways that we've been positioned in society. So I'm really aware of that. And again, really grateful that you would have me here today. And I think that this is just a one small kind of an example of the fact, and I know that other people are going to be talking about this later on, but the fact of the matter is that there are allies out there who really do want to listen in to the community, the Black community, who want to learn from the Black community as to how we can be of help during this time and moving forward to address racism all across the world, including in Canada, Rwanda, and in other places as well. And so that's what I'm here to do today. Yeah, there is a time for me to speak here just shortly on a few topics, but really I'm here as a listening voice to learn from you all as to what role that I can play. And so I would just encourage you to know that there are people like me out there who sincerely want to stand with the Black community during this time. And we are kind of waiting and watching and listening and taking part as it makes sense for us to address racism. So yeah, so again, huge privilege for me to be here. I don't think there's really anything else I need to say about myself. Lydia already said way too much. But again, what's really important is that I think that we all experience racism in different ways, right? There's some people who are perpetrating the racism, right? There's other people who are experiencing the brunt of that perpetration in different ways, right? It's going to look different for someone like me who you could say is a person of color, right? Is not a Black person. It's going to feel different for me than it will be for other Black people, as well as, taking into account the experience of racism in Africa, in a place like Rwanda compared to Canada. There's differences there. I've been to Rwanda, as Lydia said, and I know that the vast majority of the population there would be identified as Black in the terms that we use in North America. So I know that there's all kinds of other things that kind of pop up for the people there. But yet at the same time, racism does exist. And I know that your country sort of space to honor Rwandans and all of the work that you're doing to recover from the genocide and to build an independent country. And you're doing amazing in that. So, so I think maybe a lot of times, I really feel a lot of times the world can look to Rwanda for examples on how to deal with some of these issues that other countries are dealing with, because in a lot of ways, Rwanda, in my eyes, is the leader. And so one thing I wanted to talk about, or one thing that I was asked to talk about, was the impact of racism. And so I really love what Shale had to say earlier, and it really dovetails nicely with what I have to say, because I'm taking a bit of a different focus. So she talked about like the systemic impact, right? So like the impact on education, on, you know, acquiring resources, on community, like building community spirit, and like economic pieces, right? And I guess where my mind goes compared to that is right away when I think about the impact of trauma, or sorry, the impact of racism, I think about the idea that oppression in and of itself can be traumatizing. So the impact on our mental health, and there's profound impact. When you think about racism or racist experiences that you've had, there's a few examples that I could come up with that really I think are common for people who are experiencing racism. For instance, I think that there's a lack of trust comes up, a lack of trust of other people. It might be people of the majority, like white people, or it could be anybody who's not in your group, right? Cheryl talked earlier that there's racism that's committed by other people of color towards Black people. So you might not trust other people of color, including someone who looks like me even. You might look at me and think, what is this guy doing in this talk, right? And then I would understand that, right? So a lack of trust of people. There might even be a lack of trust of yourself, or a lack of trust of other people within your community group. It's very complex, and we only have a short time to talk about it, but this is an aspect that I think that follows racism around, or that the result of racism, and something that's actually profoundly impacts your relationships with other people, I think. You might be hypervigilant, right? So that's being like really aware of your surroundings and being aware of your safety. Again, I feel like this might be something that is maybe more of a North American context, to be honest with you, because I feel like that's something that people of color experience, like even in Canada. Whereas in Rwanda, Black person walking around, it's going to feel a lot different, right? The idea is that you're never really sure if you're safe. So you're always scanning to make sure that you're safe. You walk into different settings. You might be walking into your church and wondering, am I safe here? Are people okay with me being here because of the way I look? You know, or maybe into your school, or maybe into your workplace, or just walking. I mean, things are a little different now with COVID, but walking into a mall or walking into a business. I know there's been times, me myself, I've gone into communities just on a trip, driving into, you know, and then going to a restaurant and then looking around and having these feelings like, oh, am I safe in this moment? Right? So it adds a lot of stress. Impact of racism, just the history of racism bubbling up into like our daily experience adds a lot of stress for us, which of course impacts us in so many ways with our mental health and with our physical health too, for that matter. That of course brings a lot of anxiety. It's a very stressful experience to experience racism. You're never really sure how it's gonna, and you know, how it's gonna be brought out. I know I have Black friends who've been talking about the events that have taken place over the last few weeks, and you know, I have a Black friend who's a runner, and she's really, really nervous about that right now, just because of what happened in the States with yet another case of someone who was killed, a Black person who was killed while out for basically for a run, right? And so, so you know, we can kind of look at these cases and wonder, you know, what happened there. Was that racism? You know, it was clear that it was, but there's all kinds of pieces that come up from there. But the impact of that is that now Black people, like my friend, are nervous to go out for a run. There's anxiety there where there was never anxiety before. And so that's yet another impact of racism on us. I think another thing that Shale talked about that I'm just going to kind of also mention is this idea of a loss of sense of identity, or maybe a lack of embracing your identity, either as a Black person or as another person of color in my case, right? Without going into too much about me, because it's not about me, but I could easily, because of all of the narratives and all the stories that have been told about my people, I could easily kind of shy away from my identity and say, oh, well, I'm not really like them. I'm more like, I don't know, a Canadian, right? That could really damage the way that I impact, or the way that I look at myself, just based off of the racist things that have been said about the people that I identify with, actually. And so this can happen, and this has happened. I mean, we've heard about, there's been studies that have been done, even with Black youth, talking about their sense of identity and how the way that society views them really impacts the way they view themselves. Michel done much more work in the education field than I have, but I did do a little stretch of work working as a social worker in schools in an area that had a lot of Black youth at one point in my career. And our work with those youth was basically just to get them to not follow the self-fulfilling prophecy of what a Black youth is supposed to go, the path that they're supposed to go. You know, meaning, you know, drug use, being involved in drug trade, getting involved with police, arrest, not finishing school, gang, right? That was sort of the narrative that we were actively fighting against. And, you know, that was the identity that was kind of being fed to them by the media, by society, by their school in some levels, a lot of people in the community. And, you know, it takes an extra step to kind of resist that. Again, for Rwanda itself, it might look a little different, but this is definitely the piece that North Americans are facing right now. So there's that, right? All of these things can lead to depression. It can lead to fear, of course. And there's also a strange piece where it can lead to guilt as well. Racism, so us being impacted by other people, but, you know, being mistreated because of the color of our skin or because of our heritage, and somehow in a reverse way lead to guilt, where we feel guilty about who we are and walking into spaces that, you know, we think are okay, but then we're made to feel like we're not really welcome there. So that's profound. So in other words, if you look at all those symptoms, in past talks for Beyond the Veil, I've talked about the impact of trauma. Racism, actually, a lot of those things that I talked about are all different kinds of trauma symptoms. So in other words, something like racism is traumatizing, or can be traumatizing. This is something that we have to really think about and really regard carefully. Another thing too, and this is specifically for the Rwandan community in Rwanda. I understand that the dynamics are going to look really different than here in North America. I'm in Canada right now, as are some of the other people on the panel. But what's specifically important for you to know is that racism can be traumatizing to you in the same way, with the same symptoms, or a lot of the same kinds of effects, if you're hearing about it from like loved ones. So for instance, if you have a family member who's in Canada or living in one of these other countries where racism against Black people is happening and it's impacting them, and they're telling you about it, they're telling you about the experiences they're having, how hard it is to find a job, or the violence or the racial slurs and all the other things that are going on, that impacts you. It impacts you too, and it's a real impact. It's even like, if we can get all technical with psychological mumbo jumbo, like there are actually, like, trauma can be diagnosed through that way, right? So it's really important to remember that not only experiencing it firsthand, but experiencing the brunt of it, like either with your loved ones or even just with your people, knowing that there are other Black people or other Rwandan people who are suffering through this, that in and of itself can have a really big impact on you as well. So it all sounds pretty bleak, and I'm not going to end right here. I know that my time is going to be up shortly, but I wanted to talk about, there's some other aspects. There's a whole other side of racism, which I feel like I've also experienced too personally, and I definitely have seen in the Black communities all across the world, including in Canada and I think in Rwanda too. There's this idea that not only does racism bring out these kind of trauma sort of symptom things, like all these negative things, it also brings out resiliency in people. And I think that those are the stories that we really have to listen and pay attention to. People like Martin Luther King, who's a really famous American who fought against racism. I mean, there's so many others. I mean, you could even look at this panel right here, and you can find all examples all across. So I'm not saying that racism is good. Of course, it's not. But there have been studies that have shown that experiencing racism really fortifies, or can, depending on how it goes, right? You really need a community of people around you to support you through it. But if you have that community of people and some positive influences, you can actually build some internal strength, right? You really can sink your roots down deep and come out of it being prouder of your community, just like Shale was talking about, looking for positive role models and really sinking into like your identity as who you are as a Black person and with whatever specific country or culture you come from, right? That can actually happen as a result of experiencing racism. I know because that's actually happened to me. That's been the way that it's gone for me. So even though I might have some of that other stuff, at the same time, I go, you know what? No, I'm going to be proud of my identity. I'm going to take pride in my identity, and really try to learn more about it. This is who I am, right? And there's nothing to be ashamed of. There's also a lot of people who are really creative in the face of racism too, right? And so they use these opportunities to exercise their creativity. And I'm going to say Beyond the Veil conversation is one of them, right? Beyond the Veil put together and look at all these different speakers from all over the world addressing racism head on in a really beautiful, awesome way. This is just one little example, but stuff like this repeated over and over and over again all across the world shows that racism can be an opportunity for us to come together this way. Mm-hmm. And also at the same time, like, you know, it's an opportunity for us to kind of realize what's going on and build tools to address it, right? Whether it be, again, having like some talking points you can share with people, whether it be learning how to navigate really tense situations. You know, I've seen Black people do this, right, over and over again. And again, not to say that racism is a good thing and that, you know, it's nice that we have all these positive things from it, but I think that it's an opportunity to show the resilience of people. And then we'll kind of want to focus on that. So in terms of dealing with the impacts of racism, I'm just about ready to wrap up, Lydia. I know you've got a tight schedule here. Just some tips to kind of build off of the awesome ideas that Shayle's already shared with you. One, I would say, you know what, if you feel like racism is impacting you, talk about it. Talk about it with someone you trust, whether it be someone in your own group, even someone not in your group, right? Talk about it with someone who you know is going to listen, who's going to be on your side, who's going to empathize with you, and who's going to validate how you're feeling. One of the things about racism in Canada, aspects of it, and maybe I'm talking from the vantage point of someone who's not Black, so just, you know, not for a second. Aspects of racism can be so subtle that you think you're going crazy. You're not really sure if it's really happening. You're like, what just happened? Did that person just treat me that way because of, no, it can't be. And you feel like you're going crazy. But then when you start talking about it with other people of color, for instance, or other people in your group, they're like, no, that happens to me too. And I think, oh, okay, so I'm not going crazy. So they've just validated my feelings in that moment. Mm-hmm. Also, we can seek to build skills to address our symptoms of racism, right? Beyond the Veil is a great resource if you're not sure where to start, because, you know, they're always posting different tools on how to like deal with anxiety, how to deal with stress, how to deal with depression, right? So stuff like that, if you feel like that's an aspect, then that's one thing you can kind of seek out. And just to echo what Shayl said, forge tight bonds with your community. Take pleasure and take pride in your identity as a Black person, as a Rwandan, or whatever community you might be listening in from. All right, really, really super important. Seek out like media that definitely promote your group and the way that they, just all the awesome things that they do in their contributions to the world. Shayl already expressed it more eloquently than I did, so I'm going to move on. The last thing I'm going to say, and this is actually another point that Shayl said probably better than I'm going to say, is to work alongside allies to alleviate the impact of racism on lives. So what we need to do is look for concrete ways we can address it. Shayl said it beautifully. Just start talking to someone about it, right? Start with your own people in your community or people you're connected with. And my emphasis as a person of color, but not a Black person, is also to seek out allies as well. We're out there, and not to say that, you know, like I think we need to work together to really combine our efforts to address racism, and we can do so in a way that does not minimize the unique experience of anti-Black racism, right? There's definitely people who are listening right now, and that's what we're here for. So thank you all for listening, and I really appreciate it again. Hope this has been helpful in some way or validating in some way. And again, thank you for the opportunity Beyond the Veil.
Thank you so much, Brent. We really enjoyed your conversation, and I guess I only have one question. And also, I want to tell you guys, if you feel more comfortable speaking than writing, you can just send a chat, you know, a private chat or general chat, and say that you want to just ask your question by speaking. You can unmute your microphone, and then we're gonna be able to hear from you. So, but you know, I'm gonna have to read this question from Georgia. They have a question for you. I'm gonna use they because sometimes I'm not too sure if it's a male or female. I'm not too sure, so sorry guys. So they're saying, Thank you for talking about secondary trauma inflicted by seeing others go through struggles. Yes, we are all impacted by it. How can we do more about educating in people in trauma-informed care and other interventions?
Yes, that's a great question, George. I think it's so important to, I think we kind of have to like educate people, really. Those of us who have the platform to do, we need to educate people and let them know that secondary trauma is a real thing and it's powerful and it impacts us. And so, I mean, if you're an academic, we need more studies on this. If you're an educator, we need more people to talk about this. But even just in your daily lives, right? Like just to talk about the how this all kind of adds together, right? Like just hearing about these things, even hearing about the famous stories that are coming out of America, George Floyd and things like that, Ahmaud Arbery, right? Like just the impact of hearing these stories over and over and over again, how this is impacting you, either as a Black person or just as a person with a heart, right? Um, and really emphasizing the impact this has on us. I think that our education systems and our judicial systems and our healthcare systems all need to be more aware of this. So I think it's something that's going to take a while to really build. But it starts with talking about it. I think it starts with just with the education piece and really like honoring our feelings and our thoughts when we're being impacted by something like this. I don't know if that answers the question. It's actually a huge question, and something that I would like to see more acceptance of, people acknowledge secondary trauma and its impact on this.
Thank you so much, Brent. And I have another question from Nathan as well.
Sure.
Thank you for the talk, Mr. Brent. What should this generation take out of this racial segregation for best interest of the future generations?
Yeah, great question. I think that there's a couple things. I think if looking about the future generations, I think the message to them that they can do it differently than how we've done it, right? That there is hope, that there is change that's happening. Things are different than the way they were when I was a kid. Now, of course, there's still a long way to go, right? But I think it's really important to kind of instill that hope and empower the young people to understand that they can do things differently, that they can rise up against racism, they can connect across different racial groups and work together against racism as well. And really use their ideas, really give them a platform. I find that with youth, they typically have better ideas than the old people like me, right? They understand the dynamics. They have a lot more nuance, understanding of what's going on. And I think that they typically are a little bit more idealistic, and they typically don't see the world through the same lenses that a lot of the adults do who already have this stuff entrenched. So I would say address the youth, create some forums, and have them lead the way in terms of how they want to address racism. I think that you'll find that they're going to be full of ideas, all kinds of, and if you just give them just a little platform, they're going to run with it, right? So I would say that would be my answer to that. Really honor where the youth are coming from, listen to them, and really take their ideas to change the world, really.
Thank you so much, Brent. But I'm gonna have a question quickly myself. There's, everybody, some communities are saying that, we have to protest peacefully, we have to avoid violent protests, and I really want to know what you're saying, because as Shelly said, Black people actually, they are not only hated by some of the white people, they're actually hated even from other races. So when we talk about, the recent incident in China when they were discriminating Black people due to COVID, it's not only that incident, it's everywhere. While we share some of the struggles with people of color, however, the struggle, from the Black side, people's side, it's beyond imagination. I really want to hear from you. What can we say for people who think that people should stop, and they don't even know what they're trying to say, violent protests? Because, when people are angry and upset, while they are not even, most of the time, they are not even responsible from burning those houses. From the news, we have realized that actually some of the other people are trying to do some violent protests so it can be on Black people. So we need to hear what you think. What can we tell those people who think that, you know, we are violent when we're expressing yourself, be angry, we should be peaceful. They try to quote Martin Luther saying that he was peaceful. You know, we really need to understand what other community think on that say.
Ooh, that's a loaded question, Lydia. I appreciate you asking. There's like all kinds of thoughts that come into my head about it. Firstly, and this is not a way to dodge it, but as a person who's not Black, I really don't feel comfortable saying this is the way Black people should protest, right? And it's because the history of the impact of racism has been different on me and my family and my people compared to Black people, honestly and truly, right? And so I can really understand that there's all kinds of anger, really frustration that just boiled over during this time. And in some cases, it's come out in the rioting. But like, as you said, there's other people who are agitating too. So it's really hard to know what to believe, right? Yeah, so I'm kind of hesitant to say, well, this is the way that Black people should be protesting. I will say from someone who is not Black that there are a lot of people who don't understand, don't understand the riot aspect of it. The demonstration, the peaceful demonstration, everybody understands that. I think even the racists, I think, understand that too, right? They see it coming together. They don't like it, but they understand that what's happening. I think where things start to get we'll start to wonder is when there are those riots and people burning down homes or whatever. And the violence in the streets. I think that it's really tricky because the perception of people is then they start to be less sympathetic to the cause of anti-racism when they see that. And whether that's right or wrong, like we can debate that, and I'm not defending their view. This is what I'm hearing from people, particularly people who aren't Black, right? And so I think that that's something to think about. But at the same time, I think that the racist people understand this too. And so they're trying to sabotage, right? And different news cycles also spin it differently too. So unless you're there on the ground, sometimes it's a little hard to know what is actually going on. So my takeaway would be, as a Black person, you have your experiences, you have your feelings, you have the ways that racism has impacted you. You have every right, at least in Canada and in America, to voice, voice your thoughts and your feelings about this through protesting. So exercise those rights, be a voice, speak out, just like Shale was saying, band together with other Black people and other allies to do that work, right? Really important work, coming together in numbers. But unfortunately, the tricks of racism is such that you have to be, in order to be heard by this world, you have to be really, really, really smart about it and really careful with how you're exercising that. There's a movie, I'm not necessarily recommending it or anything, but it's a really fascinating movie. I actually really like it, but it's called Do the Right Thing. And at the end, it's like a microcosm, just in a neighborhood of this happening in a way, right? And it's so powerful, it's so explosive, but so powerful to see the raw emotions of the Black characters in the movie in particular expressing just their discontent about racism, and doing it through actually destroying a business that was a racist business. So, and it was powerful. It was really, really powerful. And so I think that what the rest of the world needs to do is the rest of us, we need to understand that behind, even if there are Black people rioting, which I'm not even sure of the whole situation, I think that it's, we need to be listening to what's going on and making some change rather than just putting a hashtag on a Facebook status and saying, okay, I've done anti-racism now, that's it, right? So anyways, there might be other folks who could answer this question better than I. That's my attempt at answering it. But really, I'm not qualified to answer that one, really, in some ways.
Thank you so much, Brent. And I think Georgia as well sent her contribution to your conversation. And we really appreciate that. And we also thank everybody for following the conversation. I'm seeing every comment, question you're sending privately or public. Thank you so much. Yeah, before we move on, we have an interesting topic actually, which is going to touch, our history, African history, so many amazing things we want to hear from Kizito. I want to hear from Michel in about 1 or 2 minutes. She wanted to add something about the question I asked Brent. That would be great. And then I will share the comment from Georgia. And then we're going to move on with Kizito. Thank you so much, Michel.
Yeah, sorry, I just wanted, as Brent was speaking, I just wanted to chime in. You know, he spoke about rioting and the conversation about rioting when we're hearing about it. You know, it's really diluting the conversation around anti-Black racism. And I just wanted to say that that is a plot and a ploy of the adversaries to dilute that conversation, because they want to turn the conversation away from, you know, the problem at hand, which is what's happening with the Black people, and want to flip it around and say, well, you know, look, they're violent or they're rioting. You know, it is very true that lots of those riots that are happening are being started by people who are not even members of the Black community. So I think that when you have, in addition to, I saw Georgia's comment in the chat, that, you know, when you have a history of peaceful protest, you know, we see a lot of examples of peaceful protests. We've seen Colin Kaepernick peacefully protest, you know, for the entire season, right? Football. We're seeing, you know, Dr. King peaceful protests, Rosa Parks peaceful protests. There are so many examples of peaceful protesting, and I think at this point, people are realizing that, you know, that peaceful protesting is making small steps. However, because of the trauma that they are experiencing because of the racism and oppression that's being inflicted on them, you know, people are exhausted and they're tired. And this is the way, you know, if their voices are not being heard at this point by any means necessary, they are going to go ahead and make sure that changes are made. Because in the grand scheme of things, you know, people are out there caring about buildings and monuments that are being burnt down, and we are seeing Black men being killed under the boots of the people that are supposed to be protecting them. So even when we, you know, talk about this rioting and looting, we are putting the emphasis on material and tangible things instead of, and, you know, diverting the emphasis from, you know, the lives of Black people and that mattering more than these, you know, tangible things that we're paying attention to. So I just wanted to add that piece.
Thank you so much, Michel. We appreciate a lot. I'm gonna read quickly because I know there's some people on Facebook who are not able to follow from Zoom. Georgia said, I live in the USA, and this is how it was explained to me. Each type of protest speaks to a different system or mountain. Rioting is an effective way to signal that people are tired of the larger system valuing things over people. People who riot are often signaling that these communities do not belong to us. So they're impacting them the way they have been impacted. Impact economics and they're heard. I won't say this is my solution, but what I have been taught. Thank you so much, Georgia. So we thank you so much, and thank you for everyone. So we're gonna continue with Kizito. And I know Brent has told me that he has a program after his discussion, and we thank you so much whenever you're ready to leave. Just want to acknowledge that we're grateful for your contribution. We're grateful for actually taking a step, being part of it. It means a lot, and we see the conversation you have on Facebook, engaging with other communities, especially the white community, educating them in a constructive way. We really love that, and we appreciate that, and we're together. This is everyone's issue. This is why we're here. And this is our time to learn how we can take action. So I'm going to be introducing Kizito, and after Kizito, we have Jean-Michel from Rwanda. After Jean-Michel, we're gonna have Judite and Rita. So it's an amazing discussion, guys. You know, stay with us. Kizito, I have his introduction. So he is the founder of Rwandan-Canadian Healing Center. He's actually doing an amazing work with the Rwandan-Canadian Healing Center since 2018. And after Kizito Musabimana, after overcoming cannabis abuse and PTSD caused by the 1994 Rwandan genocide against Tutsi in Rwanda, in his healing journey, he walked from Toronto to Montreal I repeat again, guys, this guy walked from Toronto to Montreal to raise awareness about substance and PTSD challenges within the Rwandan Canadian community. He walked to, his walk took place from November 24 to December 11, 2016. Kizito prided himself as a storyteller with a dream to tell successful African and Canadian stories to the world. After graduating from film and television production program at Toronto Film School, he attended an independent producers program at Centennial College, where he learned the art of building bridges through cross-sector collaboration in order to create a world we wish to see a more connected, self-sufficient, and just society. By taking a holistic approach to life, Kizito was able to overcome the worst of PTSD, severe depression, anxiety, and suicidal thoughts, and has since worked tirelessly to understand these issues in his African Canadian communities, partnering with youth leaders and leading organizations to develop programs designed to solve these challenges collaboratively for current and future generations. So we're going to welcome Kizito. He's going to touch the topic about the education of self as an African and touch based on Pan-Africanist movement beyond papers. So before he speaks, I also want to thank him. He's been, you know, helping me in many ways, even for Beyond the Veil. I don't know how he does that. This is what we're talking about, coming together, supporting each other. He's helping our youth in Toronto, helping everyone. He was making sure that this life, you know, was successful. You know, beyond that, he's living his own, you know, organization and other things. Thank you so much. I welcome you, Kizito. This is your time. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you so much. Thank you for the kind words, and I really appreciate you having us on here today on Beyond the Veil. Really amazing to continue. Like, I think this is, I've been waiting to see this for a long time, and to be able to see this as having continuous events like this, I live for this. So really appreciate you for opening the doors for us. I thank Sherry, I thank Brent, and of course everyone else who's here with us. To chime in and contribute to this discussion. And really, I want to start with a quote by one of my mentors. He says, "Powerful people cannot afford to educate the people whom they oppress. Because if once you're truly educated, you will not ask for power, you will take it." And I think this is, and this is, by the way, from John Henry Clark. He's an American historian. One of the co-founders, or at least the key figures in starting the organization known as the Pan-African movement. I personally am not a Pan-African. I believe in what they stand for. I definitely am behind the cause. And I believe in the figures that began the organization, meaning the people like Honorable Marcus Messiah Garvey, of course, John Henry Clark, Dr. Ben Yakanan. Like, there's so many powerful figures that began this movement that have led us to where we are today. So I begin there because I think that allows people to see where I'm coming from. And I always like for people to understand my background and my understanding of history. I think that for us as Africans, one of the mistakes that I think we've made throughout history is looking at the same people that we are looking to get the power from. We know they benefit from this. And we also ask them that they should give us something, because for them to give us anything is they will lose their status in the world. And I don't think, whether it's a European or an Asian, anybody that's oppressing or that's taking part in the oppression of the African people, of Black people, yes, in their conscience, they think they are not, or in their actions, they don't see how they're directly affecting us or our future generations. But if you can look at historically, a lot of these things were done by people who didn't think they were doing anything wrong. You know, I had the pleasure of going into Europe and looking at the horrors of the Holocaust. Of course, having been in Rwanda during the genocide, a lot of people who commit these atrocities in the moment, they can figure out a way to explain themselves out of it by saying whatever the political language is at that moment. And I think this is where we have an issue when we look at it as Africans, when we try to sit on the same table with these people that are oppressing us and our people and ask them to give us something that that we know that once we get, they lose the status, that they're afraid that we might treat them the way they have been treating us for years. What I want to talk about before maybe going back to the Pan-African movement is what I think the key point of what you've asked me to talk about, which is the education of self as an African. You've read my my bio, and you talked about how I overcame PTSD. But one of the things that I probably didn't share in that bio is how did I go through this, or what happened? How come I was able to go through that and I was able to overcome it? Because I still struggle. I still struggle with my depression is, I think, a lifetime thing. Of course, it's better now because I've learned to deal with it through holistic means, which is one of the things that I mentioned there. Meaning, how do I eat? Those are things I have to check. Do I feed my body based on who I am as an African? Because we all have to eat different things based on our biology. These are certain things that the system that we're in cannot, or at least whether they want to or not, they don't show the will to help us understand these things. So how did I overcome PTSD? Because I think we know, or at least maybe, I don't want to assume, but many of us have experienced these challenges. And I don't mean many of us as Rwandans, I mean many of us as Africans. Because when we come into the West, if we're not born here, one of the things we face is media. And the media is very hard on us in terms of showing us that we are not good enough, that we're dark, or that we look different, that we got to straighten up the hair, we got to do different things to be able to fit within this box, the system that we find ourselves in. And I think to overcome that, to overcome colorism, to overcome self and inferiority complexes that we accumulate as a result of the systems that we're faced with in terms of media, the education system, it takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of work, and that's one of the things that I think maybe I can begin with by saying words from one of my spiritual mentors who say that the one thing that is missing within the African community, the Black community, because he's a Black American, is identity, like understanding self-identity, self-knowledge, and self-liberation. And what he means by self-identity is, do we really know who we are? Do we understand why, whether it's white supremacists who hate us, or other forms of hate that we face as Africans, do we understand why they do that? And I think, and I'll really maybe, I would suggest that we ask that question every day we look at this and we face the racial injustice that we do. Because one of the things that we are not taught, whether it's in the general media or in education systems, is what is the true records of Africans. There is, I had a few books that I wanted to share, but there is one book that I keep sharing to everybody that I meet, because it's interesting to me that you could live to be the age of maybe 30, because I didn't find this book until I was like 28, and not know that North America was, had Africans in it way before Christopher Columbus ever thought of America. That Europe had Africans ruling in Europe for at least 700 years, from 711 to 1492. African kings in Europe, way before European ever set a foot in Africa. That, of course, there is these things that we know, which is, of course, we know Egypt is built by Africans. Of course, that also is, sometimes we argue about it. People say, oh no, it was aliens. Once we figured by Cheikh Anta Diop, by the way, I don't know how many of you have read the books by Cheikh Anta Diop, but once we figured out that it was actually Africans who were in those mummies, once we realized that those were melanated people, Europeans began saying, oh, it must have been aliens. It couldn't have been Africans. How could Africans have done that? Like, this is the fight they have, because they are like, no, we know they're Africans, but because the Europeans are like, they can't be Africans. We've been oppressing these people for like 100 years. They couldn't have done that. So they started talking about how it could have been aliens that built the pyramids in Africa. The same thing happened in America. Right now in Mexico, Honduras, in many different parts of the Central America, I don't know how many of you know, there is a bunch of pyramids there that were built there by what is known as the Olmec Empire. It was also known by the people themselves were known as the Chi people, Empire. And many of these people, when we look back, there's another book by Ivan Vasatamo, which is called They Came Before Columbus. When you actually go there, you find out that many of these people are Africans. Africans with African everything in terms of how do we tell the symbols of Africans. You can look through their hair, you can look at their culture, like how they dress, how they wore their armors, everything. They, of course, the figures, it was African. And so when Dr. Ivan Vasatama was arguing this point to the Congress in the States, all they could do was remove Christopher Columbus, because originally the Congress recognized Christopher Columbus as the discoverer of America. And Ivan Vasatma went there and he argued that there is no way Christopher Columbus could have discovered America when we could see all of these people that are here for thousands of years that have built all this and that, and also proved that Christopher Columbus never set a foot in America, on the actual, what is known as the country or the North American land. So because of that, they removed Christopher Columbus. Right now, Christopher Columbus is not recognized as the discoverer of America, even though we continue to celebrate him. I don't know why. So when you realize what we've done as a people, as Africans, whether it's in the Americas, that's North America, South America, Central America, in Africa, whether it's Egypt or the Great Zimbabwe, South Africa, before we had colonization, once you understand what the Africans were able to do at that time, once you understand that, then you can actually begin to see what your identity is. And I don't mean to differ from what everybody's saying by calling us Black. But to be honest, if you look through history, even in America, Blacks never called themselves Black until yesterday. It was the Negro. Before that, it was something else. And then it became Black, and then it became African American. We keep changing names because we don't know who we are. We don't know what is our identity. And I think without an identity, it makes it very difficult to do anything else. I always say, I have this discussion with point of groups. One of the things I really stress is having an ideology. And I agree with Sherry about working with people that you have the same mindset. I think that's key. It's important. You cannot, once again, long-term speaking, it's very difficult to work with people if you don't have the same mindset. But at the same time, if I'm an African and you're an African, or if I'm Black and you're Black, but I see a different self-identity than you, meaning who I am, how I see myself is not how you see yourself. It makes it difficult for us to work in terms, because it's like you see yourself as a victim. I see myself as, or maybe let me put it this way so I can. I see myself as a victim. You see yourself as somebody who has just failed, but who still has their day because you used to rule, you can still rule again. We are not working from the same mindset, and that makes it very difficult. So identity is core to what we are trying to do. If we are truly descendants of slaves, and that's where it all begins, then we embrace that. But we know for sure that is not true. We know that is not true. We know that, for example, Washington, D.C., the city of Washington, the powerful city that we all know, designed, developed by an African Moor, Benjamin Banneker. But how many people know that? Because we think at that time when Washington, D.C. was developed, everybody was a slave. Every Black man was a slave. That's not true. Of course, there were Black people, they were slaves, yes. But we need to understand the history of Africans in Africa, of Africans in America, in the Americas, of course, also the history of Africans in Asia. And that is in India, in China, where the first dynasty in China was developed by Africans. This is also shown, you can find the records out there. And so once you see all of that, then the question is, what happened to us? What changed? And I think that's the question of understanding the self-knowledge part. Self-knowledge tells you, this is where we were, this is where we are, how did we get here? How did our ancestors go through colonization? How did our ancestors go through slavery? How did our ancestors become the number one hated being on the planet? It's not because we're Black, it's because of who we used to be. And this, for people who know, this is the one thing that they hate about us. It's not because we are dark, it's not because we, they say we used to jump in trees. No, Like when Christopher Columbus came to the Americas, he was brought here by African Moors who were ruling in Europe at the time. So he knew who we were. These people knew who we were. The people in Europe know who we are. To this day, you go to Spain, you go to Portugal, you go to some parts of England, you find features of African kings in Europe standing still. And then you ask yourself, how are we still fighting to go to Europe, where the first university in Europe was developed by Africans, the first one in Spain. And this again is in the book by Dr. Ivan Van Satamo. It's called The Golden Age of the Moors. It's a very beautiful book. There's so many books. Sometimes people confuse me for a historian. I'm not. I just love history. I think that you cannot go forward without understanding the past. I also think that if you're planning to go to if your goal is to build a 200-year future, you have to go back at least 2,000 years in the past. If your plan is to build 1,000 years in the future, you gotta go at least 10,000 in the past. And that's why for me, it is always important to understand history, because without understanding history, whatever you're developing, you're being placed on someone else's chessboard. And so we have to do that as Africans and understand, why are we hated? Who are we? How can we actually overcome this? And that's where understanding, okay, so we were in Europe, we fell, we got kicked out, Europeans came looking for us, and of course the colonization began, slavery began. Of course, I don't know if you guys you know this, but even the Arabs, that's another thing we faced. If you read reading the John Henry Clark, you get to understand more about how the Arabs also committed their evil atrocities on Africans. So we've had it from everybody. We've had it from everybody. We continue to have it from everybody. But at the same time, we had our time. We are not a people that have no history. We have the greatest history in the world. And if that is true, then we need to be able to recognize it, understand how did we fail from that position, and what mistake did we do, did we cause? Because we made our own mistakes. We didn't treat people like the Europeans have treated us throughout history, but we made our own mistakes in Europe. Africans in Europe were having slaves. So if we know that we did something, and if we know that we made mistakes, then at least we can look back and say, okay, now we understand our identity, we understand who we are. Now how can we live? How can we go from here? And I think that's the part where many of us are having a challenge of, what is the best thing to do? Do people protest? Do people build political powers? Do people create allies? I think everybody's right. I think we should do all of it. But also I think we should go beyond that and think long term. How can we do something that makes it for sure that we don't go back and continue to have this confusion about what are we supposed to do? Who do we need to help us? As opposed to, let me go back to the Pan-African. If you look at the numbers, if you look at the people, the African people globally, but mostly in Africa, we have the numbers. If we can come together, we don't need anybody's permission to do anything. We don't need the European Union, you don't need to go to UN, we don't need the Americans, we don't need anybody. I think the challenge for us is in Africa, is within Africans, within Black people, to understand that we need first to know who we are as a unit, and understand that we are coming from different backgrounds. Understand that the Africans have a different history than the Americans do. Some of the Americans, yes, do have an African history because they came here as slaves, but not all of us came here as slaves. So we need to know all of these things. And once we understand that, then we can say, okay, now we can create allies among ourselves, but also around. We can reach out to people like Brent. We can reach out to all of these people that we have in our network. We are in Canada, of course, we have friends from every community. But I think it begins by understanding that as an African, this is what I bring to the table. This is what my ancestors did, and this is what happened to them, as opposed to the misunderstanding that the African is always here to, we're here begging. Of course, this is a misunderstanding by racist people. It's not by anybody who means to do well with us. But even that is there. But if they know, because these people are ignorant, if they know who they are talking to, they wouldn't be talking about those things. They will be afraid of us, which many of them are, and they should be if that's how they think of a Black person. but at least they wouldn't call us the beggars or the, you know, all of these stupid things that the most racist people spew, just to make themselves feel good. So I think going back to the Pan-African movement and beyond, what we need to do is really come together on the government level, on business level, and of course on institution level, and understand that Africa needs to do this on its own, and then come to allies and say, this is what we need you to do. But I think what we've been doing in the past is been bringing people on the table and asking them what they think, or should we move here, should we do this? No, that's really, that shows that we don't know who we are. Because if we understand that we have ruled the world before, I think the world is waiting for us. The world is waiting for the Black men and women to take the lead again. Because I think we, throughout, the system doesn't know what it's doing with the oppression of the Black family. And to finish here, I want to add another book by Dr. Ben. It's the book, it's called The Black Man of the Nile. The Black Man of the Nile. If you haven't read this book, please do. The Black Man of the Nile and His Family. This is where basically we're talking about how the African family developed from the core, you know, the part, we call it the area of Rwanda, Uganda, and all the way up to Egypt, and then how it expanded. And I will ask everybody, and this is the challenging thing, and probably why I started here. If you really want to understand history, if you really want to solve the challenges that we face, if you want to provide like long-term lasting solution, I beg you, I ask you, I invite you, take a journey down memory lane. And what does that mean? What does it mean to take a journey down memory lane? You really have to face your worst fears. You have to go internally as an individual and look at all the things that you've done in your life and say, ask yourself, what could I have done? You can't change, so I'm asking you, please, whatever you do, do not regret what you've done, because it's done, you can't change it. But go through it, understand it, study it, look at it and break it down like you break down an inch. Understand it. And do the same thing for your community. So as an African, what is your heritage? What does it look like? What did, if your ancestors are like Rwandans, what did they do throughout history? Where did they come from? What have they contributed that you can take forward? What did they do that you're so ashamed of, you want to leave behind and teach the rest of the world not to ever do that because you know what it does? And then beyond that, the African family, what did we do together? You know, what did we do wrong? We sold our family members to, you know, to enslavers and all these other things. Why did we do that? Beyond that, what was there before Europeans came to Africa? What was there before Europeans came to America? What was there before we had all these racism? Because again, racism is a new game. You know, I don't know. It is the, I think I don't remember who, but it is not. At least at most, it's probably like 1,000 years. Racism is most recent. Before that, when you talk about slavery, it was all about business. It was never about, oh, you're Black, so you're, you know, it was business. So this thing that is called racism, I understand it. Where did it start? Why was it started? Who started it, by the way? You'll be disappointed because the church, the Vatican Church was the key figure in the game of racism. How it began, the first moves of racism were begun by the church. So again, these are things we have to go through if we really want to understand where we're trying to go. So, you know what I mean? It's very sensitive for many of us to do, but it is needed. History is history. Records are records. You open the records, you look at them, they might be scary as they might be, but they're records. And then deal with them as you will. But at least take that journey down memory lane and know what you're facing and what you have to deal with. How do you overcome that? How do we build going forward and really begin to build something new together, you know? Okay. So that's pretty much what I can say in terms of understanding, in a brief, of course, because we don't have that much time. But for me, the African history is very long, is very broad. And the only way I can advise for anyone is just begin home. If you're a Rwandan, begin there. If you're one thing I did is when I was going through my challenges, I began researching and studying the Black history. And throughout, the more I understood about the Black history, the more I realized I needed to understand the African history.
Mhm.
And the more I understood about the African history, the more I understood I had to go back to my country, to my home. And so I went from wanting to be a Pan-African and really, you know, being out there to wanting to be a Mo. I don't know how many of you know about Mo's, but Mo's is what I call the Black Americans. Wanting to be a Mo, to being a Pan-African, to being a Rwandan. And now I sort of embrace all of it because I understand that we are all of it. We don't have one place to call home. One thing I want to challenge even everybody is America is our place. The same way as Africa is our place. The same way as Asia is our place. Because if you look throughout history, we were there. We were always there.
Mhm.
Like if you go to the Middle East, you know, in Saudi Arabia, most indigenous people in Saudi Arabia are Black. You might not see them on TV, but most of them are Black. So there is no saying Africans go back to Africa because then the whole planet is Africa. So that my challenge is that go. I challenge you to study, to read books that are not provided in universities and the mainstream, and to really question, why do they hate us? Why does racism exist? And you'll be surprised to know it's not because of what we look like. It's because of what we've done in the past. And they're afraid that once that's uncovered, the game is over, because we can read again. And when we read, we don't oppress people. Well, at least when we used to, because now, you know, we've taken on new behaviors, and it's much challenging to say that we won't. But my point is, what we've done is great, and people are afraid for our people to know that.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Kizito. We can hear from you. I think we need the whole day to really learn about the history, but I'm so grateful, encouraging all of us, you know, to go through the books and learn and educate ourselves. You know, I think we have the girl called Wikize. That girl, you know, she's known of, you know, sharing, you know, books and encouraging everyone to read. Maybe Kizito, you're gonna share with us those books titles.
Absolutely.
Maybe she's gonna pick some of them because she's doing a really good job. Actually, she reads books and then share with the Rwandan community the summary of those books. So this show how many people, especially the young people, are really committed to helping everyone understand and learn. And actually, from just these few minutes, I learned a lot. I'm gonna share what Georgia shared with us, and then the question she sent for you, Kizito. And then quickly, we're gonna have Jean-Michel. We know back home in Rwanda it's too late, but we appreciate a lot for you being patient. I know by now everybody's sleeping, but thank you so much. Georgia said that Kizito, you said a lot of powerful things here. Some of the challenges with North America Blacks, with North America Blacks, is that there has been little done to reconcile us to an African identity. Sometimes there are challenges between our Black communities that limit our ability to feel welcomed as Africans. What are some things being done that help us to be culturally united again? Thank you so much. This is an amazing question.
I thank you, Georgia. And that's, yeah, you're right. It's a very good question. And I think it's a challenging one because I have my networks in America. There is a community called the the conscious community. I don't know if Georgia knows about that community, but one of their challenge, one of their complaint is that the Africans, when we come here, when we come to America, when we come to Canada, we see ourselves different from Blacks in Canada, in America. We think we're better, we think we're special. And so that's really a very good question, because I think that's where us as Africans need to go back and look at who are we trying to work with, who are our allies, and what are we being taught? Because when we leave Africa, one of the things we and this is where the media comes in, Georgia, the image of Black America is not a positive one for us, except for the music and even then, like most Black people in movies, they're killed or they're thieves or whatever. So the system does a good job of making you look bad for us, but also for you, for our Black Americans. You see Black, when most of my friends, when I just came to Canada, they were like, so how many lions did you kill? Or like all of these things. I know they were joking, but I've never seen a lion in my life. But that's the image that you're taught. You think every African lives in a zoo, and so we think every Black man is a thief and a gangster. That this is the images that that perpetrated before we can even come to this country. So before we actually meet each other. So I think the work we need to do is work to rebrand the images of each other. So for Black America, you do the hard work you can to rebrand the African image for here. And then we can do the same thing in Africa. And that's where the Pan-African movement can do the work. And I think, especially in Rwanda, I don't know other countries, but I know in Rwanda, the Pan-African movement has been doing a lot of work. They're meeting. These are things we're looking at now, better, more broader than we used to do before. So I would say that today, the future is greater. I just challenge us to work and push even harder to do more. Like personally, one of the thing that Lydia was saying earlier, I'm in media, I went to film school, and one of my goals is to create positive image for the African community. And that's really one of the, that's my life calling, it's my dream. And until I can do that, I don't want to create anything. So if anything, I hope to meet many people who can do that, and maybe we can chip at it, and the future generation will have a better world than we have.
Yeah, thank you so much, Kizito. Yes, and we've been discussing within the Rwandan community that, you know, we are starting partnership with other communities, and I'm so happy that we have, you know, people like you, George here, Michel, Brent, you know, I've seen many other people as well, you know. I think it's time that we work together. Yesterday, when I attended the Hamilton protest, even I was part of the group that was organizing, you know, I was so happy to connect with other Black people from different communities. I think it's up to us to come together without the need to wait for those movement, Pan-Africanism or anything. It's our job. We have enough, we know enough. It's up to us. We take over everything back. And I'm so happy how now from Kizito, we're understanding that we're actually behind every great invention from the history. So thank you so much. And there's something I liked when Kizito shared how racism actually was an invention by Vatican, and then Georgia shared that that was from the 1500 years ago. So that's really something to know. So thank you, Kizito. Share with us those books. Some of us can purchase them. We share with them. Thank you so much. So we're gonna have to welcome Jean-Michel. Thank you so much. I'm gonna have to introduce him. And he's doing an amazing job from the iDebate. He's going to discuss about how to critically address issues that affect our community. More about him, Jean-Michel Habineza has been involved in the work of genocide prevention and reconciliation for the past decade. He was one of the founders of Peace and Love Proclaimers, a youth organization aimed to creating change in Rwanda and famous for being the creators to Walk to Remember, a commemorative walk that brings young people from all over the world to end mass atrocities. Jean-Michel has also for the past few years worked as a program manager at Aegis Trust and in the founder of iDebate Rwanda, www.debaterwanda.org, an organization which aims at advancing civil discourse in Rwanda and East Africa. iDebate currently works with 35 schools in Rwanda and thousands of students from the whole country. So Jean-Michel holds his master's in social entrepreneurship and change from Pepperdine University and BA in International Relations from Towson University. So we're gonna welcome him. The reason why I invited him specifically is because where I come from, you know, we come from a country that experienced the genocide against Tutsi in 1994. And the motive behind that genocide actually, you know, it was promoted by radio, media, you know, to the point where people started killing each other. If you visit Rwanda, Georgia and Shell and everybody, when you come to visit, you're gonna see that you can't really make a difference between a Hutu or a Tutsi. We look the same. Like, it's hard to say, oh, this person, you know, but, you know, colonials found a way to divide us using, you know, the shape of our nose, how tall we were, things like that. But the thing is, you know, I wanted to understand, now there's so much fear whenever we express things that are controversial, especially things that I've seen in the Rwandan community, when you share your idea or anything, you have to be careful in ways that you express yourself, because which is not a bad thing, because the genocide was promoted with the media, words from different powerful organizations, things like that, and we are being careful in the message we send out there. However, sometimes we need to share topics that are controversial, but again, that are bringing a positive change to our community. But I found that to be a little bit complicated, especially myself. Sometimes I don't know how to put my thoughts into words because I'm not too sure if this is okay or not. So we invited Jean-Michel to help us to learn how we can put all of that into words, how we can constructively express our ideas, our thoughts, without actually promoting division, without promoting segregations, things like that. So I welcome you, Jean-Michel Habineza. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you, Lydia, for the invitation. And first of all, before I get started, I just want to say that it is really hard to follow Kizito. I had to write down all the books and all the things that he's saying. I think we're both students of history. I think that history is fantastic. I think that one of the things that I loved from what you said is this idea that if you want to build the future, you really have to study history, and at a personal level, looking at your own patterns, but then also societies looking at patterns. And I loved, I loved all the talks that were there before, Brent and Michel. I think I'm going to refer to a lot of things that you talked about, because I honestly feel like my job is very easy. I feel like I only have to contribute 10% and just repeat what you guys said. So thank you for setting that up for me. I think before I even get onto the what I had prepared, I'm going to address one of the questions that was asked to Brent, and it was a question of violence, right? So there's a lot of rioting that is happening now because of, you know, because of what is happening around the world. So, you know, with the Black Lives Matter, there's a lot of violence, and I think that it's a very, somehow I think it's a touchy feeling, and it's a touchy subject to talk about. But I think that actually that's to take a little bit the ideas from Kizito. I think is because we have not studied history. I think if you refer, there's a great book by Frantz Fanon called The Wretched of the Earth, and it was written in, you know, in the early 1950s, 1960s. And he was an anti-colonialism scholar. And here's one of the chapters in his book is on violence, right? So he talks about violence. He says that the process of decolonization is one that is going to, he doesn't say it's going to require violence, but he says that it's one that is going to have violence in it. And the thing that he talks about, he doesn't condone violence, he just explains it. One of the ways that he explains it, he says that the process of colonialization is one of violence. It might not be a physical violence per se, though it is one big part of it, but the process of colonization and racism is one of violence against a group of people. Mm-hmm. So what Michel talked about, if you have lived in a system where everything is done to prevent you from actually fulfilling your potential, everything, whether from the education system to the religion, to everything is done to almost frustrate you. And he says what racism and then also colonialism does is that it creates an inferiority complex. It creates this sense of an inability to action. So a lot of the people that are oppressed feel like they can't do anything in order for them to advance anything in their own life. They have no control over their lives. So he says that the process of violence is a process of, it's a reaction to a system that has been oppressing people for generations. So he says that the process of violence that we see, and the process of violence that we're seeing right now, it will be easy to see people who are rioting and saying, oh, this is the problem of, you know, this is the problem with all this movement. This is the problem of this idea, and discredit the movement of Black Lives Matter. But there, what it will be doing is that it basically doesn't take into consideration that this is just a reaction, and people feeling like they are frustrated with everything that is happening. And then now that is the way for them to feel like they are heard. Now, it is not a way to condone violence. It's just a way to explain why certain things happen and why all of this happened. One of the things that I wanted to talk about today is how do we engage? We understand all of these things, but how do we then create a world that we actually want to live in? One of the things for me that I think is very, very important is in our frustration and in our outrage, it is still quite important for us to understand how power works. I think that the most one element of power that everyone has to agree with is the fact that those in power frame the narrative. Those in power frame the narrative. I think Michel talked about it, and I think Brent is also looked at that. Those in power shape the narrative, and when they shape the narrative, it means that they also limit what we get to talk about, but then they also define who we are. So it sort of like talks a little bit on what Michel talked about and what Kizito talked about. It is those in power that decide and say, actually, this movement is, I honestly feel like we have to stop accepting some of the ways that these movements or anything that is happening is framed. Some of it is like, well, the way that we pit things against one another. Oh, if you're saying Black Lives Matter, are you saying that other lives don't matter? Or, you know, it's a Black Lives Matter versus white life or all lives matter. And the problem with that is that then we spend a lot of, it's not an accident, to tell you the truth. It is the way that power works. It is that it frames us one versus the other. And then we spend a lot of useless time saying, no, Black Lives Matter does not mean that all other lives don't matter. But what it does is that it takes a lot of energy away from us, and it takes us away from actually dealing with the issues that we see. So understanding that power shapes narrative, power shapes the discussions that we have. And then on top of that, I think power also shapes who we are and how we understand ourselves. A simple thing, African Americans and Africans. If you were to look at our lived experience, subconsciously, we all know that we live the same things. So we have the same issues. They might be manifested differently, but we all have the same issues. But one of the things that happens is that power shapes us differently. So for some of us, I would call it maybe the concept of, the good Negro. So the African is thinking, well, you're the good Black. You're nice. You're not loud like others. You're not as ungrateful as others. I have lived in the U.S. I lived in the U.S. for 6 years, and one of the things that African Students Association and the Black Students Association did not in any way work together. And the reason was we thought that the African Americans, we thought that they complain a lot. They talk about racism and they talk about all these things, and we didn't really think that it affected us. And one of the subconscious things that we used to do, for example, myself, is I would always wear a T-shirt of Rwanda, or I'll have something that has Rwanda on it. And one person asked me once, why do you feel the need to do that? And the truth of the matter is because I didn't want to be treated just like the way African Americans were treated. But it was this understanding. I was told that just because I was nicer and I had an English that was more understanding, and it made it, then it means I wasn't going through the same thing as everyone else. So I think that one of the things understanding is we need to understand how power works. But I think most of all, I think it's all of us also understanding we all have a role to play. The problems of racism and the problems of structural violence are so complex that none of us can actually claim that we have the solution to it. I think we can all agree on the ends, but then sometimes we can disagree on how to get to those ends. I think that the biggest issue that we can have, or the biggest error that we can make, is to put all Africans and putting all Black people into one box and thinking that this is the Black voice. This is what it means like to be Black. And then what that does is that it really eliminates all the nuances of being Black, or all the nuances of living our own experiences. For example, one of the things I usually tell people that I found out that I was Black when I got to the US. And people make fun of me and say, what do you mean? You're basically Black. And I said, no, when I am in Rwanda, I am not Black. In Africa, we can look at someone and say, this one is Ethiopian, this one is from Southern Africa, this is from West Africa. And there is a richness to our own experience. There's a richness to who we are. But the problem is that because of these power structures, the danger will be for us to put all of us in the one place and understand that this is who we are. And for me, what has been, I honestly feel like has been my my life work is to say, how do we put the tools in the, how do we put the tools in the hands of students? I work with teenagers. How do we put the tools in the hands of teenagers to teach them how to express themselves? But then beyond that, how to take their own lives into their own hands. And one of the things that I do for me is I teach them the process of debate and the process of argumentation. I think that argumentation is powerful. I think that when people are able to articulate their own worldview and why they believe what they believe, they have a power that is very, very hard to take from them. One of the things that I think the process of debate teaches us is, first of all, understanding that all of us have a particularity to us. We view the world from a particular place. And because of that, it means that we do not have the full truth. And because we don't have the full truth, it requires that we engage with people who disagree with us. It requires that we engage with people that don't view the world from the same place. And I always say that out of the conflict of ideas, better ideas emerge. Now, a lot of people have said that, and they're saying, how can we engage with people who dehumanize us? Or how can we engage with people who don't see us as human? I personally think that sometimes I hate getting into those debates because sometimes I think we get to extremes. I think it's important, whichever ways, that if we are going to, that I always say it's very, very important for us to understand the people on the other side. Because if you understand people from the other side, what it does is that it gives you the tool for you to be able to communicate in their own language, in their own way. Yes, there is frustration. Yes, there is anger. But I think when we do ourselves a disservice, when we also dehumanize others and think that they must be ignorant or they must be dumb or they might be all the things that we might call it. It might have some partial truth to it, but I think it's not productive. What is most productive is to say, how can I understand my opponent's world? And then understanding their worlds, then I'll be able to take them where I think they need to be able to. But this is work that is hard. This is work that most of the time I say, you can only do it once you're secure in yourself and you have healed from all past wounds. But this is work that is also very necessary. If we are going to engage the world, we have to be at the table. And if we are going to be at the table, means that we need to be able to understand how our opponents think, and we need to be able to understand how they view the world so that it becomes easier for us, maybe not convince them, but at least it becomes easier for us to advance our own agenda. I personally have one thing that is wrong. I personally don't believe in a Pan-Africanism that is exclusive, one that says that Africans just have to deal with themselves. In the world that we live in, we don't have that luxury. But I still think though, what is important is that for us to be able to understand our own positions, but then also engage the other world on an equal basis, One of the ways that I do it in my own ways is every year I take a group of teenagers, most of the time between the ages of 13 to 18, and I take them on a tour of the United States. And they go and they debate the best universities in the US. They debate against university students who are far more resourced and who have more experience and all of that. And I take the students, and I can tell you, again, I would say if you don't believe me, watch it on YouTube. But I take the students and they go and they debate against this brilliant student. And I tell them, the reason to why I want to take you there is for you to understand that just like everyone else, you deserve to be on the table. And just like everyone else, you are not less of a human being than others. And you can measure up, not only measure up, I think you can do a great job of being an intellectual student and defeating the concepts that people have of Africa. I've done it in the past 5 years, and we've been to more than 60 universities. We have debated against Harvard, we have debated against all the big universities. And we have won some and we have lost some. But what I've said is for us, it's not about winning. It's about making sure that our students understand that just because they're Rwandans and just because they're coming from an African country, it doesn't make them less than anyone else. So I think that in our desire to change a lot of things, one of the ways that I hope, and I'm doing it, is to say, how can we empower our young people to feel like they're as smart, as brilliant as anyone else, and no one has the right to tell them that they should be silent, and no one to tell them that they less than anyone else. And what I have found in those debates and in those places is nothing makes me happier than seeing an American having to deal with a Rwandan on our own terms. So them having to read about Gacaca courts in Rwanda, them having to read about the history of colonialism so that they can engage us and be on the same level as us. So that's what we do. It's not just about saying we're against this, but it's about also building. And the process of building requires a lot of patience and a lot of work, but I think it's still possible. It's possible. And yeah, so it's been a pleasure. It's really late here, so it's actually past midnight. So yeah, I'm open to any question, and yeah, and I'll follow the rest of the conversation. But thank you for the invitation, and this is a very informative talk.
Yeah, thank you so much, Jean-Michel. We are really grateful to have you with us. Personally, I was touched on the part where you specifically mentioned that we can't put all the Black people in one box, which speaks volume, because when mostly people are addressing, are you from Africa? It's more of, as if we are just this one continent, and there's more to that. I love how you said that, we have to acknowledge, being Ethiopian, Caribbean, Rwandan, then, learn about ourselves, then come together. I think this is a great, beautiful way, to regain our power of who we are and be able to work together. Thank you so much, really. And also, I think learning our history, to be honest, what I'm taking from here, we have to do lots of learning, like from each side. I feel like we have to do lots of learning, and you've seen people on this panel, message everybody. You can find each one of us on Instagram, Facebook, send them a message. I heard you speaking about this, can you share with me some resources? I remember when I was, I wanted to learn about racism, I reached out to one of my friends. I'm like, send me some books that can teach me. So this is the time. So I'm gonna read quickly because we have 2 speakers as well, then we're done. We're supposed to finish by 6, but I do apologize. This conversation are really amazing. I'm so sorry, and thank you for everyone who's still with us. We're gonna try to go as fast as we can. Georgia said, Jean-Michel, thank you for your wisdom. I love your discussion on understanding your opponent. And as an immigrant to the USA, my experience has been that though we are a monolith, we are all treated Black in racist system and with racist people. Trying to preserve uniqueness in this current context, it's difficult. What are the ways we can show unity to the Black Lives Matters? Because what are the ways we can show unity to the Black Lives Matters? Because while being culturally unique.
I think that's a very hard question, but I think it's also a question of timing and strategy. I think that the most important thing to always say in times of crisis, I think the most important thing is unity and coming together. So there needs to be almost like a focus that is, well, in this particular moment, what we're trying to do is to build, to bring our voices together. The good thing about movements is movements need people. So it's about coming all together and saying, we're all against this one thing. I think sometimes people are shy on actually engaging and saying, well, I'm not really understanding things. But sometimes I think what people need to hear is like, we'll have time to figure out the complex things later on. But in this moment, what it requires us is to make a loud noise and say Black Lives Matter, and we're against this specific thing. And I think that's what movements do, is that they are not the end, right? So this marching, it's not the end. It's almost like a statement of us coming together, different groups coming together and saying, you know, whether it's people in Ghana, in Kenya, everywhere, they're saying this is a problem, and we see that it's a problem. And the complex things will come to it afterwards. But I think that it will be an error to stop there. The next thing that will require is to then say, okay, now with all the momentum that we have, how do we build something, a world where all of us get to celebrate it? And I think it's also understanding, like, that's the messiness of community. Like, the world would be so much easier if all of us thought the same way. And like, it's messy, and we have to embrace it. And that's the work of building. It's just messy. But I think that in this moment, let's focus on making the voices heard. Let's focus on having one clear message and one clear agenda. And then from there, it will be, you know, work that Kizito is doing, the work that you're doing, Lydia, and all these different people coming and saying, we all have the same goal at the end, but what is important right now is you know, how do we build our communities, different communities here in Rwanda and different places, and how do we, I think there was something that Michel said that is very, very important, is also where does our money go to? Because one of the things that we don't talk about is there was research that shows that there is money in the Jewish communities circulates, I think, almost like 10 times before it goes out. So a Jewish person will hire someone from another Jew to do something with his business. So the money circulates among them. But then for us, money is only twice. So the moment you have money, you're going to, you know, it goes out to other communities. But again, that is a consequence of colonialism and slavery, because in slavery we could only have one person at the top, right? It's not a fault that in every African communities, you know it in Rwanda, you know it in the US, the moment we see a person going up, the moment we see a person going up, we want to tear them down. We want to bring them down, right? Because we think that there's only a space for one person at the top. But again, that's what happened in slavery. The slave master had one Black person that they would use to oppress others, and they were their favorite, right? The good Negro. And that's the same thing in Africa, where they will have a small bourgeoisie that they would use as people who are supporting the system, right? So part of it is also getting off that mindset of thinking that if a Black person is succeeding, then it means there's not enough for us. I mean, there is a reason to why, I think Carvin, what was it? Carvin, but there's a book called The Miseducation of the Negro. And it talks about the way in which when a Black person has to advance in society, that they have to separate themselves from their own community, right? That's when a person who is in corporate America will have to say, well, I am not like those ones. I speak differently, hoping that they're going to be treated differently, but the truth of the matter is they'll be treated the same way. So all of that, it's not an accident. It's not an accident that we can have Black billionaires and Black people that are making a lot of money, but are totally divorced from everything. It's not an accident. That's how the system is made, right? And then they will say, well, I made my own money. Every system works that way. You have a few people that you pick from the oppressed group, just to make it seem like, oh, is there really oppression? Look at Oprah. Look at this person. How come they're billionaires? Look at this one. How come they're billionaires? It means you just have to work hard, without really saying that, you know, it's a system that's been created that way. And the problem is we don't know that. We get angry at people not know this is how it was created. The system is functioning. It is functioning the way it's supposed to function. And for me, it's like, then that's where we have to figure out how in everything, you know, we can in everything that we do, just make sure that we are continuously building, taking into consideration how this thing works.
Yeah, thank you so much, Jean-Michel. We're going to welcome Judite. And I really thank you on top of what you shared about how long we keep the money in our Black community. That's why we invited Michel, because we wanted to understand the importance of supporting Black owners in any ways. I think it's time, really, we do anything for our people. I see one of us making one mistake, and then we're like, let's cancel that person, you know, and then we ruin everything they have built just because we disagree, you know. Going back to Africa, one president, you know, we have a new president, they come over, they destroy everything the other one has built. You know, we see different trends on Twitter, oh, this person did this, let's cancel everything. I think it's time we protect our people as well. You know, we're not going to be perfect, but when we see how, you know, from the white community, they protect even their criminals, for God's sake. They protect their boys who are rapists. Really difficult to mention these things, but we have to hear this. I'm not saying that we protect really evil works. However, the minimum, the little that we can do is stopping destroying people that already have a seat somewhere. If we have to replace them, we make sure that we protect at least what they have built. Even if they are gone, at least what they have built, we're gonna be able to keep that. So that's how we're gonna keep our money. In our community, you know, the research showed that we keep our dollar in the Black community for only 6 hours, where the Asian community keep their dollars for 28 days, and the Jewish community 19 days. That means, you know, when I'm going to buy my hair, lipstick, anything that I want, my computers, anything, it's important that we change, you know, before I reach out to anybody else. It's not that we're being selfish, but we need the power. You know, I was speaking with someone talking about, you know, how other races are discriminated as well. For example, the Spanish community, people of color. However, like, you know, when anything happened to them, most of the time they have the power. They can hire the best lawyers. They can do anything because they have the money. They're not just going to use their voice. They have more to that. That's why as Black people as well, I think, you know, beyond, you know, understanding who we are, we have to invest in ourselves, you know, taking the power back. It's about even, you know, speaking about money. How are we going to make that money? How are we going to invest in ourselves? That was a really good thing to bring up. Thank you so much, Jean-Michel. So we're going to welcome Judite, and then we're gonna have Rita after Judite. And thank you so much, everyone. We're not going to take so long. We have a few minutes left, but we thank you so much, everybody, for sticking with us. I'm going to introduce Judite quickly. Judite Aishema is a proud Rwandan and Canadian citizen. She is a community and outreach engagement for Beyond the Veil. I told you guys today we had many people from Beyond the Veil. I'm really, really grateful for our team. And she's very proud and passionate to be part of this organization. Judite graduated, she is a graduate of psychology from Carleton University in 2016, and received a diploma in social service work from Seneca College in 2010. And she currently works as an education assistant with Thames Valley District School Board. She works in a transition classroom where she supports children with mental illness with their schoolwork and social skills. She's also involved in individuals with developmental disabilities, helping and supporting them in leading a comfortable lifestyle. Judite is a mother of 4 beautiful children, 2 biological children, a boy and a girl, and also she's also a foster mom to 2 children through Hamilton CAS. So thank you so much, Judite. So today she's going to discuss, she's going to talk about the concept, not all of them are racist. We hear often, oh, not all police officers are racist, not all teachers are racist, not all white people are racist. So, and how, and she's going to touch base on police brutality. So Judite, welcome you. Thank you so much for being with us tonight.
Thank you so much for having me and for that beautiful introduction. First, I'm gonna talk about that concept, not all of them are racist. So I've been hearing all over the social media and all platforms of people who are pretty much talking about not all cops are racist, which is 100% true. Not all cops are racist, and we have good and bad amongst everyone. However, I am gonna say that yes, not all cops are racist, but we do have a majority of people who are currently who are racist and are also working and using their badge to protect them, and that is a big problem. And more on, I'm gonna say that just because not all cops are racist, that doesn't mean that it's okay. That does not make police brutality okay. We still need to work on stopping among the people who are not doing their jobs the way they're supposed to. According to description, police brutality is an excessive use of force against civilians by the police officers. Forms of police brutality range from assault, verbal abuse, physical abuse, harassment, and sometimes even torture and murder. People of all races witnesses police brutality. So we have gender, race, ethnicity, and even different classes as well. They all pretty much witness police brutality. Police brutality have been an issue for a long time. I believe it goes back since even after the World War. In the 19th century and the 20th century, there have been white people from lower classes and middle classes, they complained of police brutality. So just because they don't have as much money, they were being treated differently by the police officers. Also, we also see in 2011, 2001, after the 9/11, Muslims were also being treated differently by the police officers. They were all complaining of police brutality, not just by the police officers, even everybody pretty much. All Muslims are terrorists and going against wearing their hijab, their scarves at work, feeling scared. A lot of women were scared to walk on the street wearing their veils because they're gonna be named a racist. They're gonna be thrown rocks on. Mosques were being destroyed. There have been so many cases of people being treated differently simply because of the way they look or the way they act. We have Jewish immigrants also from Eastern Europe also witnessed police brutality, and Mexican Americans, Italian immigrants. There've been so many groups of people who witness police brutality, which is ridiculous because these are people who are supposed to be protecting and serving the communities. And simply based on things that you're hearing on the news, and I just feel like things that you're seeing on the news and hearing on the news, boom, you're gonna judge everybody and treat everybody in the same way, and you're a police officer or you're an authority figure, you should know better because you're supposed to be helping those people rather than adding to the stress, the anxiety that comes with being in the middle of that in that group. Amongst everybody, which is why we're here, amongst everybody, Black people, Black communities have been the most to witness police brutality against by the police, and it goes way back for a long time, like after the World War II. Black people were being treated differently by the police. So it all started from back in the days. They were pretty much seen as like violent people. That's what they viewed as, and like just like we heard from everybody, really touched base on it. Black people are viewed as violent, and therefore, back in the days, and I'm sure even today too, they were pretty much, the police were, they used their job to pretty much police Black people, and to do that, they were doing that so that they could protect the white communities. So if you're a Black person living in which we see even today, if you're a Black person living in a white community, you're most likely gonna be watched all the time. If you're a Black person working in a store, you're gonna be watched, you're gonna be followed because of the way you look. And if the police comes, they're not gonna ask A or B right away. You are a criminal. You did something wrong, even though you didn't. Even though most cases, in some cases, you're innocent. You didn't do nothing at all. So we've seen, like, in the 1950s, many urban department police officers, like, so many cases. Oh, there've been so many cases of, in the 1950s, most of the things that were being done to Black people were involved physical assault, excessive use of force, unlawful arrest, verbal abuse, threats, sexual assault towards Black women, police homicide. And although police brutality against African American had become a serious problem in many urban areas in the mid 20th century, most white remained, and most white people didn't know about all these cases, because according to the news, they were not worth knowing. So they didn't even need to share this. And I don't know exactly how many cases. I heard that question, but I'm sure it was a lot. It was a lot of cases. In the 20th century, we've been seeing so many cases against young Black men, all ages, like of kids who are all being treated. Like, we have shows now all over social media about kids who've been put in jail for something, for a crime they didn't commit, and have been there for 20 years, 30 years, you name it, and their whole life are now turned upside down simply because they will happen to be in a place at the wrong time, simply because of the way they look, and they happen to be at a party and something wrong happens, and boom, their whole life is turned upside down. Which I can't even imagine, speaking as a mother, having to worry about, because kids will be kids, teenagers will be teenagers. We all know that teenagers get into things, and then having to worry that my son may be at a wrong time, at a wrong place, and then I may not be able to see him again, or they might be able to land in jail for for a crime that they didn't commit. And I think the most powerful thing about this whole George Floyd thing that happened is being able to see someone step on a person, another individual, for 9 minutes, looking at a camera like nothing is going on, like he no fear, no emotion, no nothing, like as if he knows he's gonna get away with it. And that's exactly what we saw happen. Like, at the end, after that video, he just simply got fired. And then 2 days later, oh, now they're gonna put him in jail, and then he's gonna get third-degree murder to, like, second-degree murder, which is like, and I know the fact that he's a police officer is what's protecting him from getting first-degree murder, which is what he should be getting. But then when you think about it, is he doing police work at that moment when he's stepping on somebody's neck who's already been arrested, who's not resisting an arrest, who's not causing any danger to him at all? Like, how's that fair? Which I'm sure is why a lot of people are upset, and everybody is upset, and just seeing that from happening, and the fact that people are not comfortable because they are getting away with it. In Canada, even though we don't see often here in Canada, there's still police brutality against black people and minorities and people from indigenous people. So we'll see more Black men are most likely to be arrested for a crime they didn't commit than white people. More black young men, like teenagers, are most likely to land in jail for little minor things that I'm sure most white kids will probably get a little slap on the wrist for. So there are so many systematic injustice in this country that it's scary even having to raise. I personally am scared raising my son in this country. After what we saw with George Floyd, or normally were our main thing that we used to, or personally what used to make me comfortable is I could teach your kids what to do, how to act. But what we saw is like, it doesn't matter. He could just be at a store and have a cup, like what that other women did to that black man. Like you could just be at a store or walking around and somebody calls the police on you and boom. That in itself would result into something that you can never forget, that would change your life, that would change your kid's life. So it's definitely scary. And the hardest part is the fact that it's happening from people who are supposed to protect us and people who are supposed to serve us. Another thing that I'm gonna touch base on is pretty much I'm gonna talk about many people have been complaining online against the Black Lives Matter movement, stating that all police officers are not bad, as if that's supposed to make us feel comfortable, that all police officers are not bad. It doesn't matter. I may be driving and then I meet that bad police officer. So yes, all police officers are not bad, which I can, even myself, where I live right now, I live in a small city with mostly white people. And since I moved into this city, I've only been made feel comfortable by one person. I've been here for 2 years and only one person has probably crossed the street and said hello to me. And he's a police officer. He's the only person that's come and talked to my husband, have a conversation with him, have a conversation with my kids, welcomed his kids and felt comfortable. And you could tell that he's comfortable having my kids play with his kids. Where I am, it's like, even walking on the street, we bought this house after working so hard and we want to feel comfortable. We're living in a smaller community, which the best thing about living in smaller communities is the unity. You're able to meet your neighbors, talk to your neighbors, your kids play outside together. But we haven't been able to have that experience because of the way we look. And even walking on the street, it's like saying hello. Like, my kids are so friendly, and which, as Rwandans, you have to say hello to people. Good morning. We don't believe in stranger danger. Like, you say good morning to everyone on the street. And of course, my kids were raised that way. I'm raising them that way. That's how I was raised. And walking on the street, like 4-year-olds say hello to someone and they just give them a dirty look and keep walking. And having to explain to my 4-year-old son that those kind of things are gonna exist, and those kind of people are like, it's scary. It's scary for me, and it's sad to see. Even thinking about what school to take your kids at, going to the hospital, having that fear that who am I gonna meet there? What kind of doctor am I gonna encounter with? Is it a racist doctor? Is it a good doctor who's gonna give me the treatment that I need to be treated? And all you really should be worrying about is going to the hospital and getting the treatment that you need. But we're having to worry about those kind of stuff, which I'm gonna talk about next. It's like, it's not just about police officers. It's our teachers. It's our doctors. It's anybody really who's an authority figure who works with other individuals. And we shouldn't have to be having those kind of fears. I shouldn't have to worry about what teacher is gonna be teaching my son next year. Is he gonna be a teacher who's gonna be taking his education seriously and teaching him the way he would teach other kids? Is he or she gonna single my kid out and make him feel like they have a problem, or they are not good enough, and they're not gonna go far enough in life because of the way they look. You know, we shouldn't have to worry about those things, but yet these are things that we think about, even taking our kids to school, or you know, even, yeah, we know we're in Canada and maybe we haven't seen many cases of people getting stopped on the side and then ended up losing their life. But still, nowadays, when I'm driving and I see the sirens goes up, oh, right away my heart goes up in my head. I'm hyperventilating. I'm scared. Like, you can't help but being scared, because you know these things do exist. As much as we want to think that they don't, they do. They exist amongst each other. And then even doctors going to the hospital, like, you just don't know. Like, you don't know how you're gonna be treated. You don't know how you're gonna be welcomed, and yet you're sick, and you shouldn't be worrying about that. You should just be worrying about getting the treatment that you need. But yet, these are things that we all unfortunately worry about and have to think about. So what I can say is, I've been seeing so many things online. I've been seeing some positive things online. I've been seeing some negative things online. What I want to say is that I'm just so thankful for this this platform that we're having of talking about these things, because I believe this is a way to change. This is how we're gonna change. This is how we're gonna gain knowledge. I live in like I said, I live in a small city, and I have met many different people. I personally feel like a part of racism is just not knowing. People don't know how to act. People don't know what to say. And I feel like sharing these kind of topics and talking about it openly. Like, I talk about my hair. I talk about the things that I have to go through with my hair. I talk about my kids. I'm open. I'll tell my coworkers things that I worry about, like taking my kid to school, choosing what school to take my kid, choosing what city for my kid to go to school in. These are things that I talk about a lot, because these things exist. And you know what? I've been getting nothing but positive outcome out of that, because people don't know. They really don't know. They haven't been. They don't know any better. So for some people, and I'm not saying all of them, they've probably been raised in racist families, where they are taught to be scared of Black people. Black people are not good. But Black people are not good enough. Black people are criminals. Black people are this, that. And another thing that I can talk about to my fellow Africans is I've been noticing so many negative things coming even from fellow African people. And again, I think Kizito, somebody mentioned that, it's like they don't notice themselves as Black. They don't see themselves as being Black American. So they are different. They are Africans. And most thing I've been seeing is like putting the Black people who were raised here down, talking about Nabatesi, like they're spoiled, they are lazy, they don't work, and stuff like that. I mean, you have to educate yourself and learn why are they, if they are, I'm not saying all black Canadian Canadian Black Canadians are lazy. Of course not. That's not the truth at all. But if somebody is lazy, why are they lazy? Why are they not able to work? You have to look into history. You have to look about the oppression. That is something big that could definitely make a group of people not be able to achieve as much as they want to achieve, because they went through that. And yes, maybe you went through it too, and you were able to overcome and get better and be stronger, and let your oppression build you up and make you stronger. But not everybody is gonna react the same way. So we can be coming from the same family, go through the same trauma, and one kid will grow up to be strong leader and just become bigger than ever, and then the other one will be completely down. So if you think about psychologically, we all have different personalities. We have different ways of viewing things. We have different ways of accepting like this kind of like stress and anxiety, and like we just all react to things differently. So instead of bringing that person who's already down and putting them even lower, maybe you should try and help him out and figuring out what the problem is, and see how you can build build them up so that they can be a better person as well, and a better, and I believe that's what we're doing today. If educating, having these discussions is really important. I think with this, hopefully, and I'm so proud of the movement, how many people have been standing with Black people. I've been seeing so many people sharing, and like people like Brent talking back and answering questions to some of other white people who may be confused and not understanding things, or maybe just plain being ignorant. But you know what? Sometimes you can take that and turn it into just nicely and quietly talking to them, and you can turn it into something, an education, like an educational opportunity, which I've been seeing a lot too, even here. Like I face racism almost on a daily basis, and my reaction to it is support. Like it's my chance. Instead of getting mad, the way I've been dealing with it is my chance to educate you. Why do you feel that way about me? And sometimes some people are blunt about it. It's because of this, it's because of that, because you're lesbian, because your people do this, because of that. Are you telling me there's no anybody in the white communities who does these things? How come you're not affected by it? But then you're gonna look at me because I'm Black, and you've seen somebody who's done things, and then we are all in the same boat. I think that's all I have to say. I think what we need to do is educate our anybody who's in our leaders and people, our teachers, our nurses, our doctors. We need to educate ourselves. We need to do better in trying to understand people and helping people out rather than bringing them down.
Thank you so much, Judite. It was a really beautiful conversation, and I really like the fact that we can't tolerate any more people saying that some of them are racist, other ones are better. It's important that anybody who's serving the community in any ways, they can't be racist at all. The thing is, it's up to us. What are we doing? Especially you guys who are in the school system, what is the conversation you're going to bring back? We've been, in this lockdown, not going back to school. I'm actually worried about how we're going to look at to each other when we go back to schools, how teachers are going to work together. But I think fear actually it's one step towards, learning and understanding other people that are different from you. So while we worry that some people are going to be afraid, actually they have to be afraid and learn ways they have to change, learn. It's actually learn to unlearn. So I'm not gonna say much. I'm gonna give you a question from George here and also a few comments, and then we're gonna welcome Rita with a very beautiful topic about emancipation, freedom. When we talk about all these things, sometimes it can feel like a puzzle. It can feel like, how do we get there? Every year we see, especially back home, celebrating, Independence Day, or it's been 30 years since we're free. However, we're not seeing any freedom. We're not feeling like that. I don't celebrate those days anymore because I feel like we're still somehow under colonization. I want to be honest. So, but we're gonna have, Rita talking to us. Before I move on to Rita, she's gonna be our last speaker. It's not that her topic is not important, but I feel like her topic is actually powerful because all of us really need to know, how can I free myself from this system that oppressed me? What can I do? We really need to wake up and feel powerful and do something about something. So something about what's going on. Yeah. And the other thing that I was saying about what she did say is that, even talking not only from the Western context, let's talk about back home. It's important that, we always say like the youth unemployment, it's a huge issue actually in Rwanda. But we mostly say they are lazy, they don't want to do anything. This generation, millennials, are just lazy, things like that. However, we don't look about those, intergenerational trauma, so many things they have to inherit from, the behaviors of the elders, things that we do right now. And I think it's important that we look into all these things, especially the psychosocial needs, before we see ways we can help our people, our kids in school, so they can perform better. We heard from Michel saying that our kids, actually the Black kids in schools, they have the low achievement because we don't have access to many of the things. For example, as a Black mother, when I come home, because I didn't come here with the wealth, many people from the white communities and other communities, actually some of them inherit the wealth of their families. However, I came here as I am, as an immigrant, I have to work even more than twice harder. A mother, immigrant, student, worker, things like that. So, while other kids after school, they go maybe to learn different activities, earn skills in things that they like. Our kids, most of the time, the focus is homework, eat, shower, go to sleep. So it's a lot, but I feel like, we have to do something about it. It's gonna be a sacrifice for us, for the next generation. Put that in your mind. What we're doing right now, the work we're doing right now, it's not just for me, Lydia, or anybody who's here. It's for us and mostly for the next generation who's going to come. We don't want them anymore to inherit the mistakes of our elders, things like that. So Georgia said, Judite, thank you for bringing so open about your experience as a mom. Sadly, our children do have to play by a different set of rules. We spend our lifetime praying for the safety of our kids. What are some ways you talk with them about the excellence in this crazy world? Being so open, no, it's okay. The other thing, Michel said, the strategy from the oppressor is to allow few of us to occupy positions of power to debunk the truth about systemic oppression. Thank you so much. So Judith, I'm gonna have you respond to that question for 1 minute so we can have Rita and then conclude the conversation. We've been here for more than 2 hours, but thank you guys. Judith, this Georgia question, can you respond to that quickly?
Personally, my kids are very little. They're only 4 years. So we haven't been really talking mostly about the racism issue. But then again, I feel like maybe reading books about racism. I know we're talking about hair, like different, because I know that's some of the things that come up at a young age. Is like, why is my hair so different? How come? Because even they go to school and maybe there's gonna be a kid who's gonna talk about their hair. So having those conversations with the kids and just explaining to them that we are all different, and expressing that they are great, they are valuable, maybe even just and putting all those positive things out there, being a great role model to your kids, and maybe showing them we have so many great role models in the Black culture, people who have made it very successful, and just making and giving them hope, and making and maybe taking all that negativity, as sad as it is that we don't want to admit it, but they do exist, and the kids get to hear all these things. So explaining, like just trying to show them the positive side of being Black, and accepting. Personally, even after I had my daughter, I stopped dyeing my hair, or like relaxing my hair, or wearing wigs a lot, and try to wear my hair natural as possible. Learning to love ourselves as Black people, and hopefully nurture that to our children as well. And talking about these issues, if your kid is old enough to understand, talking about what's happening and explaining it to them. Because as I don't know about all Black people, but I know Africans, we have a way of trying to protect our kids from the truth. But I feel like I'd rather tell my kids and teach my kids about these issues rather than them going and learning them from the street, and maybe having to witness racism before knowing what it is or what it's about, and really putting it in their head that, you know what, you are great, you're amazing, you're smart, you're a great person, amazing person. And I feel like that's really important, and that's the way that I'm planning on taking that.
Thank you so much, Judith. And myself as a mother, like when I went to protest, I take my kids. I really, want them to feel powerful. I really want them to understand that, being part of this march, it's not about violence as what they see on the TV. I want them to see a different picture. It was really fun. There was actually a guy we met from through Rita. we don't know him. He just gave us a whole photo shoot right there. And I think like connecting in that way, seeing, amazing Black figures out there, that's one way to empower our kids. Yeah, thank you so much. So yeah, Shell want to share one short comment, and then I'm going to welcome Rita. Thank you, go quickly. Thank you so much.
Hi, I just wanted, sorry, Lydia, to share one comment. So because our children, when they go into the world, they're faced with all of these conversations and ideas about their Blackness being ugly, and their Blackness being undervalued, and their Blackness meaning that they are not intelligent. I think that it's such a good idea, and something that I see that works with my students is really taking the opportunity and being intentional about the material that I'm reading to them on a daily basis. So the material such as children's books or chapter books, do my students see themselves and their identities reflected in positive ways in the material that I'm reading? And so, there's always this, this saying that for every bad thing that is put out there, you need 7 good things to combat that. And so what we need to ask ourselves as parents or caregivers, for that matter, is what am I doing every day? What am I showing my kids? What am I, teaching them? What are they seeing? What am I telling them that is loading up their backpack so that they feel when they go out into the world, if somebody tells them anything opposite of that, they have enough tools to be able to counteract that narrative. And so that's what we have to start doing, building our children up so that they're able to counteract the narratives that are out there that are going to tear them down, because tearing them down is inevitable because of the system that we live in. So I just wanted to add that piece.
Thank you so much, Michel. Really having a good time. We're going to welcome Rita. I'm gonna introduce her a little bit. You guys find Rita especially on Instagram. She's going to represent the Rwandan community to compete in Miss for Humanity Global. So she's doing amazing work. Actually, she's motivating me in many ways. I see her as a strong activist, fighting for social issues, the freedom of her people. And other ways that she introduces herself is that she's a humanitarian activist and a youth leader and the founder of United for Humanity organization. She was born on... Yeah, that's my family all. So she was born on September 25th, 1997. She's also currently crowned as Queen of Emancipation Canada. She has shown interest in various aspects of charity work and has participated in activism work for women's rights since the age of 16. So she has worked with women and children who were survivors of sexual-based violence and the 1994 genocide against Tutsi. She has also worked hand in hand with organizations that fight against homelessness in Toronto, Canada. She has hosted events to contribute and help people affected by natural disasters by creating spaces where all youth of positive minds and change makers can come together to join forces to work towards positive causes, and that helps support the community and strive for the betterness of humanity in love and unity. So Rita, right now, she's going to talk to us about emancipation and our action towards freedom. And then we're gonna conclude that conversation. And thank you so much. Rita, we welcome you.
Thank you so much, Lydia, for this great initiative, and thanks to everyone who has spoken earlier. I feel a tremendous amount of gratefulness to each and every one of you. Like, there's so much wisdom that has been shared, and to speak last is I don't know, like, I don't have anything to say. Like, everyone here has touched so many great things that I don't know where to begin from. But when, like, according to the topics I've been given, emancipation and freedom, like, I try to read things and look through the Google, like, what is freedom, what is emancipation, and like when they gave us the rule in the January 1st, 1863, that's when they signed emancipation for Black people to be freed, for every slave to be free. But what was freedom? That was just a written rule that has been passed on. And for so many things, like, we have the human rights organizations protecting us as Black people, as a human race, that we're not supposed to be killing each other. When you kill, you go you get imprisoned, you face some punishments, but we still do this anyways. So what is freedom? Is it something that is started by a government? Is it systematic or economical freedom? Is this society? Or what is really, like, when it gets to one person's own understanding, or even the way you live every day? Like, I'm in this movement of Black Lives Matter. I'm also, like, watching the Afghanistan people who are facing almost another genocide as of now. And there is Yemen, like, people, it's literally, UNICEF has said this is the worst of the conditions they have seen a country in. And I'm like, so what are we to do? Is it also against white supremacy? Is it also against the American injustice? So you find all these issues that are facing human race, but it's us against each other. I'm talking us as a humanity, as a human race. Mm-hmm. So even in Rwanda, we had the genocide, 1994 genocide against Tutsi. Even in Burundi, there was a genocide recently, but they haven't declared it as it is yet. But people are killing each other because of what you look like, because of what you believe in. There is the Muslim war. There is women who are being killed. So I'm bringing all these issues to say that people will find reasons in any way to kill another, because there is a need to be in power, there is a need to be in control, there is a need of superiority. Mm-hmm. And I feel like until we learn to love each other, to love ourselves as Liz. Mm-hmm. James Baldwin said it clear. He said, Black people will either look up to another or look down to each other, but they will never look at each other. And the white people will just look away. So who are we? When you say, someone mentioned that we even have racism among Black people who just naturally hate each other. Like, you bring a bad name to me. I'm an artist, I'm a poet, but there are people whose poetry talk about so many things, like about weed, about the use of sexual violence, like about all the things that I don't identify myself with, but they are bringing the bad name to me as a Black African artist. Do I owe to hate them? Do I owe to different myself from them, not support them? So, like, there is, as collectively, we have our own bad image. Mm-hmm. Judite said all white policies are not that terrible. Mm-hmm. Yes, they're not that bad. But right now, we're saying police are bad. Like, to quote, the youth are saying, fuck the police, because we're like, wow, you are killing us. But is it all the police? There is a father who is a policeman, who goes every day, who went in because maybe the injustice that was done to their family. Now he wants to create change. But this time around, he is the enemy of the people. So do we also bring him down within the system that is colonizing and killing our people? So these are all the questions that we get to ask, and it brings me down to the understanding that it's a problem of humanity. It's not a problem of just race, of culture, of what we look like, or of belief, or religion, or sexual choices. It's about us as human race. What are we satisfied with? Who are we individually? Because we don't want to be, even like I'm with Pan-Africanism, as Queen of Emancipation was bought by Marcus Garvey, who also like established Pan-Africanism is the whole continent, realizing all the African countries coming together. But when you ask Africans, they're like, no, I'm not an African, I'm a Rwandan. No, I'm not African, I'm Burundian. Okay, is it better now?
Yeah, it's better now.
Thank you. So I was like, how are we going to be able to elevate ourselves when we can't even agree to disagree? At the end of the day, I feel like the way to freedom, or the way to emancipate ourselves, is if we're able to love ourselves. Mm-hmm. And Mother Teresa said, when she was asked, how do we introduce love to people? She said, go home and love your husband, love your children, and love your family. And also love yourself. Then in that way, they would like do unto you, unto others what you wish to be done unto you. Because the whole involvement of the whole vengeance of the universe is not a systematical vengeance, but it's the whole matter of gravity, that everything goes up must come down. So even when Kizito mentions that we Africans, we've been there before, we've been at the greatness table, what the world sees as great, of course. And I'm like, it's true, because right now we're at the bottom. How did we get there? The whole world, the whole like universal understanding of how evolution works is something that goes up, comes down, and ultimately one thing is gonna go up again. So let's love ourselves and try to understand who we are as individuals and bring that to the world. I'm not a great philosopher. I haven't done great education, but what can I contribute to the world? Maybe by being who I am fully. And if I want to be loved, if I want to be appreciated, if I want to be heard, then let me do that to others as well. That way they will appreciate. There is something in creating self-value. That way, if I'm able to be able to fully experiment what I am as a person and as a whole, I will be able to give others freedom they deserve as well. So that's all I would say for today. And thank you so much, Lydia, for this opportunity.
Oh my God, Rita, that was really straight to the point and powerful. Thank you so much. One thing I really get out of this is that, you know, the key is loving ourselves, understand who we are, and bring that to the world. Because mostly when we're born, we're told what to do, who we are. You know, it's up to us to understand who we are and bring that to the world. If the white community is confused who Black people are, it's up to us to educate them. If people are not understanding, and actually you highlighted also something about, you know, what is the freedom do we need? Is it, you know, about political freedom, economical, social? And I'm like, oh my goodness, we're fighting for so many things. However, I think, you know, all of you guys have one powerful message, which is truly understand who we are. And I think that's the core part of psychology. You know, once you're able to understand who we are, our need as human being, I think we are so unstoppable, because we're gonna be able to invest in ourselves. We're gonna be able, you know, nobody's going to tell you differently, because you truly believe and embrace who we are. So I'm gonna welcome, if anyone has a question to Rita. Please, that was so quick. I wasn't able to ask people to send their questions. But if anybody has a question, please send your question. Otherwise, we're gonna move on to the conclusion. Okay, so what I'm gonna do, yes, Georgia is saying, Rita, can you share some of what you're doing, some of your work? So we really need to hear from you, Rita. I was actually impressed to know that you started the activism work when you were 16. So that's really powerful. So please share with us a little bit about yourself, what you're doing. Thank you. Rita, can you hear me?
Thanks again.
Okay.
What I'm doing is, yeah, I can. Is it okay? Awesome. Yeah, I was gonna say that what I'm doing is I don't know what to say exactly, but in terms of the misfits of humanity global, it's like it's a whole competition where over 40 countries participating, and some countries, for instance, like Canada has about, because it's a big country, of course, they have like 3 ladies representing it, and we bring the ideas to the table. What do you want to do for the human race to improve the conditions to which they're in? So I presented my organization, which is United for Humanity, because I don't want to be restricted. The reason why I say United for Humanity is because humanity is wide, and it's not something that you can put in a box. And I feel so passionate about so many different things. If I say I'm going to go for the children's right, I don't want to be restricted that I can't stand for women's right or for the man's right in that manner. So I want to be able to say I'm fighting for a human race, anything that improves your condition, anything that stands for your right as a human person. My principles are being like freedom is the first thing in my mind, and also patriotism. So meaning like I owe my pledge to some nation or to some country and the rules and the regulations which guide them. And in the world of chaos, I need that to be able to exist with others. And I feel like everyone should have that. I'm reading about Libya, about women's mutilation systems, and I'm like, this in itself is another kind of systematic problem, because this is a culture thing. And so it's in that manner that I come forward with United for Humanity, because I want everyone to come up on the table. Like right now we're like, oh no, I'm an African Canadian, so I can't fight. I'm not in the USA. Why should I fight for Black Lives Matter? I don't know George Floyd, or like Trump has no effect on me, so why should I care about that? And at the end of the day, I'm like, it's a problem that is facing human race. Take away the color, take away the religion. What is remaining? A human being who is thriving each and every single day to be better, to put food on the table for their children. And that way, when you realize that you find a common ground, you're like, yes, I'm not the same color as them. Yes, I don't have the same religion as them. I don't live in the same country as them. But could this also be done unto me sometime? Because in every country, there is always someone who holds the upper hand. There's always someone who has the better power to do and say whatever they want, and the population will follow. So there is most likely an ultimate and written rule and condition somewhere that this could be done unto you in somewhere or another. I have a friend who's from Afghanistan, and she's telling me, Rita, they're killing our people. I'm like, they're killing.
Oh, you are disconnected a little.
So now we have something in common, because at first she was like, oh no, you're Black, I support you, and sign this petition too, that they can donate this Black-owned business, that they can't only sit around and be like, oh, it's terrible news, not think about it. And if you don't.
Rita, you were disconnected. I think you're back.
Thank you. Yeah. Awesome. So yeah, I'm like, let's do
Rita,
something about what is happening to us.
Do you mind if I also give you this question so you can finish it quickly? Somebody saying that, can you share with us? That would be the last question.
Sure.
Yeah. I had that question as well when you talk about human race. She's like, can you share with us how we can learn to see ourselves as human race before our Blackness or our nationalities or our tribes? I think I had that question as well, but I think, you responded well. You were like, if everything is gone, religion, skin color and everything, who are you? And your answer was that we're just human race. So I think you can answer to that. 1 minute, please. And yes, thank you.
I was going to say that if your life matters to you, then you should be able to recognize that someone else's life matters to them as well. Mm-hmm. That would be like my full answer. Like, if you feel like your life is valuable, your life is to be respected, and if someone kills you, is injustice done against you, then you should be able to feel like the other person will feel the same way as you do.
Thank you, Rita. Thank you so much. I think everybody who shared with us anything, every conversation is worthy more than 1 hour of discussion. So, and I think, we're gonna continue to have different this conversation in different ways as well, as you always do at Beyond the Veil. And actually, if you feel like there's a topic you can benefit from, a lot, you can actually send us an email, a message, say that talk to us in any ways. We'll be happy to bring back that topic specifically, because I think like everything that we shared here is really important. However, we're about to conclude, and we're gonna try to post these videos on YouTube, in different parts. That way it can be easier for people to listen to every speaker individually, and I think it's gonna be helpful. Yeah, the last thing we're going to, the big question is, where do we go from here? I really like this part of the conversation. We've been having different people being engaged in this particular topic, you know, on different platforms. And actually it was a book by Martin Luther that he wrote, you know, where do we go from here? And I found this, you know, title really interesting. So I'm gonna ask everyone who shared, or each one of our speakers to have 1 minute. I know we have a lot to say, and I know when we are passionate, when we feel like you want to bring a change, there's a lot to say. But I'm going to ask each one to give your conclusion in 1 minute. I'm going to start from Michel. I'm going to start from Judite. You know, what can you tell families, you know, for example, families who are seeing everything, people are like, you know, is this going to stop? What's going to happen? You know, for families, I give you 1 minute concluding your conversation. What can you tell to families that need a change, that need unity, that are fighting from for anti-Black racism? What can you tell them? Judith.
For what I can say to the families is pretty much, number one, we are already doing the first step, which is standing up and putting these the issues out there and protesting, vocalizing, just having these discussions with our family members and talking amongst ourselves, and hopefully and putting it out there, sharing with other people, sharing our concerns and making our voices heard, in order for us to ask for the change that we need so that we can feel more comfortable within our communities.
Thank you. And I'm gonna have Shell for Black people, for the Black community global. We need to know, you know, where do we go from here? Some people are like, you know, is this going to end? I like the other way when you posted, I think it was from Blackest Team, when you said that, you know, we have to chill. This is not going to end until we see the change. And I really, really love that. And there's so many people from my community sharing that, and they loved it. So from the Black community, globally, what can you tell us?
Well, what I can say is, you know, I'm not speaking on behalf of the entire Black community. I'm speaking as a member of the Black community. And one thing that I'm going to just point out is that, you know, it's, I was just actually in the chat and I had somebody replying saying that, you know, it's, we are enjoying the liberties that our ancestors have fought, you know, for. And while that is true, there are some things that our ancestors have fought for, however, that we are, you know, experiencing. And then there are other things that are not. Racism manifests itself in different ways. There's individual racism, there's structural racism, there's institutional racism. And the whole point is there's no such thing as partial freedom. It's either you're free or you're not. Mm-hmm. It's either you're in captivity or you're not. Mm-hmm. So if we are, you know, for those of us that feel that, you know, we are living in our liberties and freedoms, then by all means, go ahead and live in that liberty and freedom, in your opinion. But for those of us that feel that, you know, we are still in bondage, that we are still fighting a system that only seeks to oppress us and oppress our children, and we're seeing the evidence of that, then by all means, champion those people to keep on going and to keep fighting for what you believe in. You know, it doesn't, we are not successful as a race when a few of us get to the top or a few of us make it. Because at the end of the day, institutionally, we're still being oppressed. Even as an individual that is a Black individual that makes it, quote unquote, I'm gonna say that, by European standards or the standards of our colonizers, really, you're making it, and how many members of your community are up there with you? If we don't start thinking like that, then really, we will never be able to attain generational wealth. We will never be able to, you know, reestablish our own communities, because we are only thinking individualistically. And yes, while the human race is important, and yes, while there is hatred from Black people to Black people, that was implanted as a mechanism and a strategy by colonizers to divide the people. That was the whole strategy. That was the whole point, divide and conquer. That was the point. So when we're talking about, you know, the inception of, you know, Black people against Black people, and there's a war between, you know, between us internally, that was actually a strategy to make sure that the people would not become united in order for the bigger cause. At the end of the day, we are being considered at the bottom of the tier. We are being considered the less value out of everybody worldwide. And so what we are saying is, if that's the case and Black lives start to matter, that means everybody else that thinks that they're above us, their lives will matter too.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm just gonna finish on that note.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much, Michel. We appreciate a lot for everything you brought on this table. I'm gonna have Kizito, I'm gonna give you a difficult task since Jean-Michel is no longer here. You're going to address to the Rwandan community and Africans in general, you know, where do we go from here? What people need to know, you know, how to move forward? What do we need? What does it take to get there? Please talk to us. Actually, as Shell said, you know, she's not speaking to the Black community, she's speaking as a member, and yourself, you're speaking as a member of the Rwandan community and African in general. So welcome, Kizito.
Yeah, thank you. And it's definitely true, as Cheryl said, it's hard to speak for everybody, but as members of those communities, of course, for me as a member of the Black community as well,
Mm-hmm.
I would say today, we have everything we need. That's one thing that I'm really, sometimes when these things are going on, sometimes people would ask me, how come I'm not reacting? And I think I'm just at peace with where we are as a race of people, whether you're talking about Black people, Rwandans, or Black people in general. We have everything we need. We might be oppressed, yes, but we have everything we need. The knowledge is on our fingertips. The how to succeed is something we can go back through history and figure out how to do it. It's already there. The blueprint is available. So where do we go from here? For an individual, do that journey that I mentioned, down the memory lane. If you can have the courage to go through that, then join a community, join a network. You will find other people that have done the same thing. And then for us as a continent, the African continent, I really think we need to do that too. I think we need to go back down the memory lane and look at where we have gone wrong. Because it's clear where we have gone wrong. We've gotten independence, but the documents we signed were not to give us freedom that we wanted. So clearly, we need to go back to those tables and say, you know what, we need better freedom. You know, like I think, I don't know about the Commonwealth, but for the countries that were under the control of France, to this day, and this is documented, we still pay, they take the money from Francophone countries, and Africans have to go borrow money from France. Our own money, we borrow it and we pay interest to France. So these are things that are happening today and we allow it to happen. So if you ask me where do we go from here, it's clear where we need to go. Go to France and tell them, rip those pages, let's start over. So these are like, it's just a matter of having that courage, eliminating fear from who we are. And I think once you have that identity, knowing who you are, knowing where you come from, knowing who you are as a human being, as everybody's mentioning, Rita and everyone else, then you shouldn't have no fear. You should not be afraid of death because if you don't fight for something, then how do you expect your children to fight for it? So, and I think for me as an individual, through my organization, we've chosen to fight differently. We are fighting through training. We're providing leadership training. This is a part of it. It all came from understanding that to go far, you must go way back to understand what took place so you can go further. So yeah, leadership training for the communities, for aspiring leaders, and really make sure that you understand where you are, who you are, where you are, and how you must go forward.
Thank you.
That's what I would say.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. And oh my goodness, we're done with Rita. Rita, speaking, you know, not on behalf, you know, as one of activists, you know, what a message can you give to them? Where do we go from here? Seeing, you know, Rwandan youth, Black people, young people who really want to make a change, you know, what can you tell them?
I would say realize which you want to stand for, but in any way find something that you stand for. Because Kizito said it well, that you either stand for something or you fall for anything. And it's rather like it's better to like we're not just fighting to exist or to like just breathe out and be there for the sake of existence. We are fighting to live And to live and be alive is to be able to achieve the things that you appreciate, the things that you want in life. And if you are a young person, look at the things that you find difficult to achieve in this moment, and then realize that it could have been easier if someone took the steps that you're afraid to take right now. So do that for your children, do that for the future generation. You might not live long to see it happen, but it will happen if you decide to make a movement or to make an impact to what is taking place. So find, like, we're not asking you to go and be the next Martin Luther King or be the next Malcolm X. No, do the best you can in your own ability. And even if, regardless of how small it is, whether it's reposting what's taking place, whether it's talking to a friend or family to know where they stand at, if they are misunderstanding some things, explain to them, like, little things. It's collective. It's like the small little impacts that ultimately, like, make collective massive change. I don't think, like, anyone ever told Martin Luther King that he was have a dream. I would like to imagine among his friends somewhere, like, what, you have a dream? So I feel like it's the moment to make anything matter. Like, whatever you want and whatever you're afraid to do, just do it. And yeah, every little thing helps and matters.
Thank you so much. I've been adding some of the information that you shared here on Twitter. So just a summary of each one. So it was a really, really beautiful conversation. It was a longer conversation, but to be honest, I don't regret, because I believe that we got a lot from this, and I truly believe that, you know, anybody who's gonna hear from this, they're gonna be empowered, they're gonna be, you know, be able to be encouraged. And thank you so much, everyone. We done with this conversation on behalf of Beyond the Veil. I thank you so much, especially everybody who stayed with us. I have Console from New York. She's gonna be our next guest. She has a book. She has an amazing story as a survivor of the Rwandan genocide against Tutsi. We're gonna be happy to have her. She has an amazing story. We're gonna discuss the importance, because many people from our community don't believe the importance of, you know, seeking help from therapy and everything. She's gonna tell us how she benefited from therapy. When I spoke with her, she was like, actually, I wasn't going to be able to write that book or to share my story if I wasn't, if I didn't benefit from therapy. So she has a very, very, an amazing story. I can't tell you much. It's gonna be next weekend. Everybody, Georgia, your questions. Thank you so much for coming up with questions that we needed. Actually, yeah, it was amazing. You know, your contribution, which is Dirindiro. Actually, that's my brother from Rwanda staying with us. I know in Rwanda it's like 1 a.m. or 2 a.m. Guys, everybody, Protegen, Moses, Raisa, I can't say everybody on Facebook. We have more than 80 comments. That's I'm telling you how your conversation was so engaging. People are still there. I thank everybody from the Facebook page. We thank you so much. And yeah, I'm gonna let everybody go. Tomorrow is Monday. Thank you so much. Your 3 hours, I know you can get done, but we thank you a lot. Have a beautiful evening. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Okay.
Bye, everybody. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.